Chapter 318. Nanheng sat on the sofa not far from the bed, opened the plastic bowl, and ate a few mouthfuls of porridge. He did not answer Mo Jingshan's question but thought of the picture of Jin Wan lying next to Mo Jingshan and then the picture of Feng Ling not even bothering to look at him. He felt that this bowl of porridge tasted like dog food in his mouth. In fact, Feng Ling is a very delicate person, but she is too good at hiding her emotions. As Jin Wan fed Mo Jingshan breakfast, she said softly, "I've been in contact with her for so long. Although she's cold and distant most of the time, it's just that the protective layer around her is too thick." As she spoke, she blew gently on the bowl and then fed Mo Jingshan a mouthful of porridge, asking with concern, "Is it still hot?" Seeing Jin Wan carefully fearing that he would be scalded, the smile on Mo Jingshan's lips grew clearer. Just now, the head of the bed had swayed a little, and he was now sitting on his stomach. Compared with Nanheng's cold face, his face was like a spring breeze. Nanheng really felt that he couldn't eat breakfast anymore. "I'm afraid you still don't know how he married you?" Nanheng said with a snort. Jin Wan glanced at him and replied, "Do you mean that I saved him by the Los Angeles River a few years ago or something else?" Nanheng's cold brows moved and he was a little surprised. "You know," Mo Jingshan said lightly, "there's no need to hide it." Nanheng looked at Jin Wan and smiled. "Aren't you afraid that he married you to repay a debt of gratitude?" Jin Wan. He said no. Mo Jingshan glanced at him coldly. "You can't control your own woman and can't bear to see me live a peaceful life, so you want to take the opportunity to sow discord?" Nanheng sneered, leaned back on the sofa like a master, and casually put his hands on the back of the sofa. Looking at the two people on the sickbed, one feeding and the other eating, he sneered and said, "What do you like about this once arrogant and domineering first miss? What's so cute that you, Mo, are willing to tie the rest of your life to her?" This was a good question. Jin Wan had wanted to ask that earlier. Mo Jingshan did not even think about it. He gently pressed down the spoon that Jin Wan had just brought to his mouth, chuckling softly. "A 16-year-old girl pouting her lips and blowing air at me without any rhyme or reason." As she blew, she said that this was her first kiss. "Isn't that cute enough?" Jin Wan, "Can you not mention this matter again?" From the perspective of her age, he was clearly AF** king retard. Nanheng rolled his eyes. "Is this F** king cute?" Mo Jingshan's elegant and deep brows rose slightly as he calmly said, "At High City's banquet, the way she hid in a corner to avoid the crowd in order to secretly drink a few glasses of wine was especially cute. When she heard that they were going to get married, she stopped her father's car on the street and argued that she wouldn't marry anyone she didn't love was especially cute. In order to escape from the wedding, she used a pair of scissors to poke 10 to 20 holes in her dress was especially cute. At the wedding, she purposely bent her fingers and declared that her fingers were crippled and couldn't wear the wedding ring was especially cute. After the wedding, she was so angry that she refused to throw the bouquet and hid backstage to vent her anger on the flower petals. Jin Wan, she suddenly wanted to find a hole to hide in. Nanheng expressionlessly said, "I'm just asking casually." Mo Jingshan said seriously, "I can count a few more." Nanheng remained expressionless. "Save it for when your wife is 3 months pregnant. Go back to your bedroom and count them." Mo Jingshan looked at him with pity. "Didn't you want to hear it just now?" Nanheng remained expressionless. "I'm about to throw up from the few mouthfuls of porridge I just ate. Don't talk about it. Thank you." Seeing that this topic had come to an end, Jin Wan tested the temperature of the porridge in the bowl, scooped a spoonful, and brought it to Mo Jingshan's mouth. When the man looked at her, she pursed her lips and said with a hot face, "No wonder the Mo family flew a new wedding dress from France right after I destroyed it. So you saw it?" Mo Jingshan immediately smiled. Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. "Are the flower petals delicious?" Jin Wan sighed. She held the bowl in one hand and covered her face with the other, looking as if she couldn't bear the memory of her stupid behavior. After a long time, she put down her hand and tried to feed him the porridge calmly, lest she accidentally spilled it on him. "What else do you want to ask?" Mo Jingshan raised his lips and took a look at Nanheng. At the same time, he slowly raised his hand and pushed a strand of hair from Jin Wan's cheek behind her ear. Jean Wan hurriedly turned her head slightly to avoid his hand. Don't move your hand. Mo Jingshan smiled and put down his hand. Nanheng waved his hand on the sofa, looking as if his heart had been devastated 10 times. I've been your brother for so many years, but you haven't even praised me once. Did this woman blow a breath of fairy air to you? Is she King beautiful when she drinks wine and eats petals? The corner of Jean Wan's mouth twitched. She didn't care about fairy air. But her behavior was really seen by Mo Jingshan. She really wanted to disappear on the spot. She was going to lose face. Before she fled, Nanheng answered a phone call and left. Jean Wan continued to feed him porridge, and Mo Jingshan continued to eat cooperatively. The ward was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Only the little woman's embarrassed expression didn't match the silence. Mo Jingshan took a look at her. Jean Wan also took a look at him, then put down the bowl and cleared her throat. What you just said is true. Then, what on earth do you like about me? Mo Jingshan looked at the porridge that she had taken away and lowered his eyes to think. You can also understand that I'm bewitched by your beauty. Jean Wan resisted the urge to roll her eyes. There are so many beautiful women out there. Even a small celebrity from the entertainment circle would have a certain level of beauty. Do you have to describe yourself as so shallow? The man smiled. Who told you to be so beautiful? Jean Wan's heart was trembling from his smile. She couldn't talk to him anymore. She really couldn't talk to him anymore. She really couldn't flirt with him anymore. Jean Wan's first reaction was to blush and her heart beat faster. She really couldn't stand this big boss who was said to be cold and unapproachable to be flirting with her seriously. After a few seconds, she calmed down a little. My reason tells me that what you've seen and heard about me must be more than that. When on earth did you find out that I was that person? At that time, the street lamp was broken, and I couldn't see clearly, let alone you who couldn't even open your eyes. Chapter 319. Jean Wan. Mo Jingshan's smile faded. My life is yours. My body and mind are also yours. If you dare to abandon me now, won't your conscience hurt? Jean Wan. She abruptly put down the bowl of porridge, pulled up the blanket on the bed, and covered his face. The man's body couldn't move, so she covered his face and head. After maintaining this position with the blanket for a full 5 seconds, she was the first to give in and tugged the blanket down with a pained expression. Jean Wan's face was cold, and she said seriously, "Get well first. If you get hurt like this again in the future, I'll really abandon you." The man smiled and didn't provoke her anymore. He pointed to the porridge she put on the table. Continue to feed me. For the rest of the day, many of the little brothers of 11 Base came to the hospital to visit behind Nanheng and Feng Ling's back, but not everyone could enter Mo Jingshan's ward, not even the people of 11 Base. Jean Wan received the call and went down to pick up those little brothers. When Nanheng suddenly came back and glared at them, the little brothers expressed their sympathy and prepared to leave dejectedly. Before leaving, one of them suddenly said with emotion, "Mr. Mo, I wish you good health and a happy married life. Because Mrs. Mo is really a good person." Mo Jingshan, who sat quietly on the bed, was not affected by the liveliness here at all. His handsome face was calm, but he raised his eyebrows because of these words. The little brother pointed in the direction of the distant Cambodia. Previously, when we were in Cambodia, Mrs. Mo not only cooked for us, cleaned the house, but also washed our socks. We've been single for more than 20 years, and it was the first time a woman washed our socks. I couldn't bear to wear them. The moment Mo Jingshan heard this, Nanheng directly kicked his butt and chased them out. Get out. They left, and the ward was quiet for a moment. Mo Jingshan turned his eyes to Jean Wan. Wash socks? Who ordered you to do it? Without waiting for Jean Wan to answer, he turned his eyes to Nanheng. Don't look at me. I don't even believe that eldest Miss Ji can cook. How could I let her do this? Nanheng felt that it was necessary to make those brats run 50 laps around the base after they returned. She's too worried about your safety. She's afraid that she'll let her imagination run wild and find something to do. Jean Wan coughed. I did do it myself. There's no need to mention this kind of thing. Just now, they were just joking. In fact, I didn't wash many pairs. I was just doing it out of courtesy. Otherwise, I'll feel bad if I eat, live, and be protected by them. Nan Heng snorted. Those brothers whose socks you've washed may face the fate of being target practice by a group of newbies from today onwards. You may feel even more apologetic. Jin Wan. I don't think so. Nan Heng coldly raised his brows and pointed at Mo Jingshan on the bed with his chin. If you want them to be spared, you have to plead for them. Based on what he said, it wouldn't be good if she didn't plead on his behalf. Jin Wan turned her eyes to the bed. Mo Jingshan indifferently glanced at Nan Heng. If you continue to use moral coercion on her, I'm afraid those brothers of yours will become targets for 2 years. Last night, Jin Wan went to the gynecology department for a checkup too late, so there were some other items that she did not check. Jin Wan was called to the consultation room by the doctor. In the ward, Nan Heng tossed his phone onto Mo Jingshan's bed. A private message appeared on the screen. The Su family received the news last night. The moment you entered the operating room, they came. With Officer Ents around, they weren't able to enter the hospital. However, after Su Shui was forcefully brought back to America, she must have been frightened by the way the people at the base punished her. It's said that she's been locked up at home and her mental state isn't good. The Su family is still brooding over this matter and wants an explanation from you. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at the message on the screen. Mental problems? Nan Heng coldly sneered. I think there's an 80% chance that she's really frightened. The psychiatrist visits the Su family every day. It's said that she often doesn't sleep for the entire night. Even the slightest movement would scare her into screaming. The doctor said that she's overly frightened. Mo Jingshan curved his lips slightly, coldly saying, since there's a mental problem, why would they want an explanation from me? I know a psychiatrist in Los Angeles. If they need it, send someone to send her to a mental hospital and treat her. How is this treating her? Mo Jingshan clearly wanted the Su family to lock Su Shui up at home. Now, he wanted to lock her up in a mental hospital. However, what Su Shui did to Jin Wan in T-City, if not for Elder Su's face, Su Shui most likely would have lost her life. Elder Su already knows that you've returned to America, Nan Heng said. Are you going to pick up his call? Mo Jingshan's expression was indifferent. No. Late at night, Los Angeles was even colder than the north of China. The wind was biting. In the Su family in Los Angeles, the window of the bedroom on the upper floor of the villa was wide open. A young woman sat by the window, facing the cold wind, holding a glass of red wine in her hand. She took a sip and looked at the stars and moon in the sky. Her ears were filled with the conversation she occasionally heard when she went downstairs during the day. Mo Jingshan has returned to America. He's in the hospital, but he can't get in. The police and another group of people are guarding the hospital very strictly. We just want to take advantage of his rare return to America to make up for what Shui has done. Our Shui only went to T-City to seek justice for her cousin. She was indeed very absurd and offended Mrs. Mo, but no matter what happened, the doctor said that Shui's brain was severely damaged and her mental problems were even more serious. Shui is still so young. We can't really let them kill her. Elder Su, no matter what, Shui is your grandniece. She did this for Jilan. Now that Mo Jingshan refuses to see her, you should at least step forward and speak for her. Since Mrs. Mo is unscathed, why would they destroy Shui? She is less than 20 years old, a few years younger than Jilan. The Su family has been friends with Shine Group for so many years and has a relationship with the base. Besides, Jilan used to be engaged to Mo Jingshan, so she can help him. I think it's better for you to solve this problem. Su Jilan gently swirled the red wine glass in her hand and slowly took a sip. Not long after, she became slightly tipsy. Her watery eyes slowly turned to the room and looked at the photo frame on the white shelf beside the bed. In the past 2 years, in order to prevent her from going to him, Grandpa had grounded her and forbade her from leaving Los Angeles or America. Chapter 320. She spent the whole day in Mo Jingshan's ward. At 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, a doctor came to give Mo Jingshan an anti-inflammatory injection, and Jin Wan returned to her ward. Hospitals in the United States did not advocate injections, But Emo Jingshin's back and head wounds were deep, and he had just had an operation, so he needed continuous anti-inflammatory treatment to prevent infection, so he had to have 2 bottles of intravenous drips. However, the speed of intravenous drips was much slower than in China. It was said that this would reduce the possibility of the drug destroying the human body's resistance. After waiting for more than an hour, a bottle of medicine was not even 1/3 used up, so Jin-won didn't go back and fell asleep in the ward. When she woke up, it was already midnight, and she was awakened by the ding sound of a text message on her cell phone. She guessed that if she didn't sleep by Emo Jingshin's side, she would really have nightmares. Just now, she dreamed of blood again, but this time, it was not Emo Jingshin but herself who was injured in the blood. Jin-won opened her eyes with a jerk and sat up. The ward was quiet and dark. She turned to see the screen of her cell phone on the bedside and immediately picked it up to check. Usually, only Xia Tian and Xiaoba liked to send her messages when they were not busy. She thought it was another call from the studio in High City. But the sender was not a number she was familiar with, but a string of foreign numbers. She received not a text message but a photo. Jin-won hesitantly stared at the photos, stretched out her finger, and clicked on the photos to enlarge them. There were 3 photos. The first one was of the famous Beverly Hills in Los Angeles. Under a row of distinctive European-style buildings, a black limited edition Porsche was parked. The man opened the door and threw something back into the car, and the young woman stood beside him, waiting patiently and leaning her head gently on his back, making an inadvertent posture of snuggling up to the man. This scene was captured in the photo, and the moment she leaned close to him, the sweetness seemed to overflow from the photo. Although the man in the photo had his back to the car door and his expression could not be seen, Jin-won recognized that it was Emo Jingshin. The young woman's smile was bright and flamboyant. When leaning against his back, she seemed to know that someone was taking the photo and happily raised her hands into a V shape, smiling happily in the direction of the camera. The second picture was not taken. Looking at the slightly blurred pixels, it should be a picture taken from a surveillance camera. In the picture, Emo Jingshin had just stepped out of the elevator. From the scene, it seemed to be the elevator of a private apartment in Los Angeles. The opposite door was open, and a young woman came out in a bathrobe. Her hand was in the crook of the man's arm, and half of her body was leaning against his arm. Their posture looked very intimate. The man's face was not in the picture. He was wearing black trousers and a black shirt. It seemed like he had just returned from outside and returned to the home where he lived with his lover. The third photo was a photo of an engagement ceremony. It seemed like the staff of the hotel or somewhere had taken the photo from a distance. The floral decorations and dreamy scenes of the ceremony were all captured in the photo. At the end of the red carpet and flowers, the door of a Rolls-Royce limousine opened. On the red carpet, a tall and slender man in a black suit stood silently without any expression on his face. A young woman got out of the car and walked towards the man. Although the man and woman in the photo were very small due to the background, the moment the woman lifted her skirt and the diamond engagement ring on her hand was captured in the photo, these 3 photos. If Jin-won understood correctly, the woman in the photo was the so-called former fiancé of Emo Jingshin. What was the purpose of the person who sent her these photos? Not to mention that Emo Jingshin had explained to her about the engagement in the United States a long time ago and had personally solved it. Jin-won had only expressed her dissatisfaction at being kept in the dark by Su Shuei, but she had never distrusted Emo Jingshin. Besides, she had just experienced a life-and-death situation with Emo Jingshin. These photos were taken many years ago, and the person who sent them to her at this time was too obvious. But who on earth was the person who sent her these photos? Was it the woman in the photo or some busybody? Even if she didn't think these photos were very revealing, many of the angles of the photos looked only one-sided intimacy, and Emo Jingshin's expression and face had never been facing the camera. But Jin-won had to admit that her heart was still a little moved, and her fingers resting on the phone screen felt slightly cold. Was it because they had returned to Los Angeles, and that woman was ready to show up? Jin-won was still looking at the photos when her cell phone suddenly rang. It was Emo Jingshin calling. She answered the phone. "Why don't you come over to sleep? Aren't you afraid of having nightmares?" The man's voice was warm and light, still a little low and hoarse. It sounded like he had been asked to lie down by the doctor during the injection, and he must have been lying down for a long time. Ji-Nuan slowly rubbed her hand on the phone, saying, "You just had an operation. I'd better not sleep at your place. I'll sleep there in a few days when your wound is better. Just now, when the doctor knew that I slept at your place in the morning, he specially said that your wound and the operation wound need some time to heal, and you can't make any violent movements. I'm just sleeping with you." "How can I make any violent movements?" The man chuckled. "Ji-Nuan, the doctor just reminded me. He doesn't want me to disturb your rest." "Well, if you don't come over, I'll go over to accompany you now." No. You can't move or get out of bed now." Ji-Nuan hurriedly lifted the quilt and got out of the bed. As she walked out, she said, "I'll go over now." "Wait a minute. I'll put on my coat and come over." After getting a satisfactory answer, the man hung up the phone. Ji-Nuan put down the phone and turned to pick up her coat. When she was about to leave the ward, she paused, lowered her head, opened the page of the photos just now, and deleted the 3 photos and messages from unknown sources. There was no need to keep these things. Ji-Nuan didn't think she had a strong heart, but when she was in T-City, she had said that if the other party wanted to steal her man, she should do it openly and not play any tricks behind her back. So what if she was engaged? She was a legitimate Mrs. Mo. She had never thought that an ex-girlfriend was a terrible creature. Relatively speaking, the more the other party liked to use this method to make her presence known, the less she dared to confront her face to face, and the more she liked to play this kind of trick, the less likely the other party was to win. Chapter 321. In the dead of night, because Mo Jingshan's ward was guarded by the people from 11 Base, there was no need for too many medical staff to be on duty, so after avoiding the nurses in her ward, Ji-Nuan quietly crept to Mo Jingshan's ward. The people from 11 Base would not stop her. Although they felt a little strange that Ji-Nuan would come here so late at night, they just nodded politely to her and let her go. When Ji-Nuan pushed open the door of the ward and entered, she saw that the head of the man's bed had been shaken again. The man was wearing the same light blue hospital gown as her, and his clean hair was more fluffy and messy than usual because he often lay down, but it didn't spoil his handsome appearance. There was a silver 12-inch laptop on his quilt. At a glance, she knew that the MO Corporation in High City needed him to read some documents. "It's only been a day since the operation, and you're already working?" Ji-Nuan gently closed the door, walked over, and slipped into the man's bed. At this time, Mo Jingshan had finished the injection, and there was only a trace of white transparent medical tape on the back of his hand, but it obviously didn't affect his work efficiency. Mo Jingshan took a look at her and was about to raise his hand to take Ji-Nuan, who had climbed into the bed, into his arms, when Ji-Nuan quickly pressed his hand down. "Don't hold me. Don't move your arms." The little woman was now very careful about every movement on his body. Mo Jingshan didn't comment but smiled. "It's getting late. Sleep here tonight and don't go back, okay? I just came here quietly to avoid the doctors and nurses. Now I won't go back even if you drive me back." Ji-Nuan said, firmly covered the 2 of them with the quilt, lay beside him, and looked at the company documents on his computer. He had been in Cambodia for some time. Although there were vice presidents and many reliable managers and assistants in the company, there were still many final decisions that Mo Jingshan had to deal with personally. Judging from the number of unread emails, it could be seen that there were a lot of backlog of documents. "Do these documents need to be typed?" Ji-Nuan asked. Mo Jingshan's hand stroked her hair. As soon as Ji-Nuan finished speaking, he saw that he needed to type a reply. He had just retracted his hand to touch the computer when she suddenly sat up, took the computer away from the quilt in front of him, put her hands on the keyboard obediently, and turned to look at him seriously. "How should I reply? Let me help you." Seeing that she was so proactive, Mo Jingshan did not reject her good intentions. He signaled with his eyes for her to look at the other documents on the screen that had already been approved. "Write your consent here. At the same time, circle the items that need the attention of the company's departments. Let them arrange it themselves." As Ji-Nuan listened, she quickly typed and highlighted the key points. Half an hour later, there were more than 10 pages of documents. Some required approval, while others required approval or rejection. Previously, when she was in the studio, she sometimes had to face the planning documents submitted by the subordinate departments. However, facing the various documents of such a big company like the MO Corporation, she really felt like an emperor reading the memorials to the throne. The ward was very quiet. Occasionally, a white light flashed on the computer screen when a new email was opened and refreshed. One of them approved the documents on the computer, and the other taught her how to deal with the planning and changes of the various departments. Although Ji-Nuan had a deeper understanding of some decision-making than before she went to T-City, at this moment, such tacit understanding made her feel particularly hard-won. Usually, in High City, Mo Jingshan was so busy that he almost didn't have a holiday on weekends. Now, while he was injured in the hospital, he could still teach her how to deal with these matters step by step. The next morning, when Nanheng entered the ward, he saw Ji-Nuan sleeping on Mo Jingshan's bed again. What was more, Ji-Nuan had obviously come last night and didn't go back to her own ward to sleep. As soon as Nanheng arrived, Ji-Nuan woke up and slipped out with an embarrassed expression, saying that she wanted to go back to her ward to wash up and brush her teeth. Seeing Ji-Nuan run away, Nanheng walked in with an expression as if he hadn't slept last night. He pulled a chair over and sat by the bedside, saying, "Elder Su called me last night, and Su Xue's parents went straight to their house to make a scene, asking Elder Su to plead for their daughter. Now that you've turned off your cell phone and are living in the hospital leisurely, accompanying your wife every day, kissing, hugging, and playing romantic games. Elder Su knows about my relationship with you, so he directly came to me. Last night, he called me several times in the middle of the night, causing me to not sleep well last night. By the way, Su Xue's parents are influential figures in the Swan Group. Now they are almost breaking their legs for their daughter, and Elder Su often avoids them. Their dispute has been going on for a long time. Now that you've returned to the United States, it's clear that things have escalated to a certain point. If they don't see you in person, they may directly come to the hospital to make a scene." Nanheng looked thoughtfully at Mo Jingshan, who was expressionless, leaned back in the chair, picked up an apple on the table next to him, and took a bite. "I don't think the Su family will give up so easily. Su Xue's parents want to make a scene purely to protect their daughter. But Elder Su, who has never stirred up trouble, now wants to take this matter on his head. Clearly he has ulterior motives," Mo Jingshan said mildly. Nanheng pondered for a moment. "Indeed, Elder Su is here for you. You've been suppressing him for so long, and not long ago, you made a hard plan to restrict the Su family. In the end, Elder Su hasn't even seen your face. An old man who has been all-powerful in the American-Chinese business world for many years definitely won't be convinced. Besides, he still has a precious granddaughter who can't forget about you." "All-powerful?" Mo Jingshan smiled. "For 100 years, the Chinese business circle in the United States has been either black or white. It's not like you don't know which side is behind the Su family's business. In this kind of place, the Su family isn't the only one who can stand firm. Elder Su should be able to tell that your tolerance towards them has been declining. Recently, he has been very close to your father. Back then, wasn't it your father, Chairman Mo, who single-handedly arranged the marriage between you and his precious granddaughter? I think he most likely knows that he can't beat you, so he plans to borrow your father's east wind to stabilize himself." Nanheng smiled faintly. "Based on this old fox's usual tricks, he should know that your weakness is Ji-Nuan. I'm afraid he has already begun to investigate Ji-Nuan. Aren't you afraid that if she continues to stay in the United States, she will be swallowed by the Su family one day when you're not careful?" Chapter 322. I don't know if they can swallow it or not, but the Su family will certainly not let the person who occupies the position of Mrs. Mo stay in peace. After all, it's the position that Su Zhilan dreams of. Nanheng said with a faint smile, "When we were in China, Feng Ling's cell phone had been installed with an information software connected to Ji-Nuan's cell phone. Once there are unknown or strange calls and messages, Feng Ling can see them. Last night, Ji-Nuan received a few photos, but she was very calm and deleted them. If I guess right, she hasn't mentioned it to you until now." "What photos?" Mo Jingshan put the computer aside and cast his eyes on him. When Su Jilan was with you, her assistant liked to take photos of you. These photos were taken at an angle that could easily be misunderstood. It's not easy to find a few very confusing photos from so many photos. It's even more difficult for Jinwan to remain calm and not even ask about it. Mo Jingshan's cold eyes swept over him, making Nanheng feel a chill on his back. Obviously, he was not in the mood to keep him guessing. Photos, Mo Jingshan said in an unkind tone. Hearing this, Nanheng knew that Mo Jingshan was used to compromise on Jinwan, so he didn't beat around the bush and threw the cell phone to him. These 3 photos. If I remember correctly, when Su Jilan ran away from home because of a conflict with her grandfather, she lived alone in the apartment. At night, she called you and said that the water heater at home was broken and asked you to help her check it. That night, she was going to leave you there, but you came back in less than half an hour. I've been curious about this for many years, but I haven't found a chance to ask you. Did you touch her at all that night, or too fast? Nanheng said this with a smile in his eyes, obviously teasing. Mo Jingshan looked at the photos on the cell phone and coldly spat out 2 words, I didn't touch her. For her to be able to keep a screenshot of you entering her apartment's hallway till now, it shows that her heart hasn't cooled even now. If Jinwan were to see these 3 photos, her heart would probably be experiencing a magnitude 10 earthquake. Did she really not say anything when she came to sleep at your place last night? Mo Jingshan thought of the scene last night when Jinwan helped him deal with the documents here until late at night, and his eyes darkened. He turned off the cell phone and glanced at the door that Jinwan had just closed when she walked out. Jinwan did not return to Mo Jingshan's ward. After washing up, she called Feng Ling to go to the commercial street opposite the hospital to relax. Although the doctor had told Jinwan to rest in the hospital, she was allowed to simply go shopping. After all, Jinwan was not injured, and it was good for her body and the child to go out for a walk occasionally. Besides, Feng Ling had seen the photos Jinwan received last night. When Jinwan called her, she immediately came to take her out of the hospital. It had been a long time since he had been to the United States. Other than some small shops and small buildings, the streets of Los Angeles had not changed much. It was already a mature international city, unlike China, which was still fully developing and had many investment and business opportunities. The hospital they were staying in was a large, professional, and well-equipped private hospital in Los Angeles. The hospital was located near downtown Los Angeles, very close to the busiest commercial street here. This time, their return to the United States was very sudden, and they didn't bring many clothes back. Jinwan bought a thick, wet white cashmere coat for herself and a black cashmere coat for Mo Jingshan in accordance with the same cold season in Los Angeles and High City. One black and one white, she made them look like a couple. She also bought some other clothes that she needed to wear frequently. After they were tired, they passed by a milk tea shop. She couldn't drink anything now, let alone touch milk tea or coffee. Seeing that there was warm milk in the shop, the 2 of them took their bags and sat down in the shop. Feng Ling accompanied Jinwan all the way and didn't urge her to go back to the hospital early. If she wanted to come in and sit for a while, she would accompany her. If she wanted to drink milk, she would buy it for her. In short, if Jinwan could digest those hidden, unhappy emotions in such a calm way, she would accompany her more, in case she had nowhere to vent and kept calm. Jinwan sat by the window in the milk tea shop. Feng Ling helped Jinwan line up to buy milk and then went to the other side to buy a small cake. Jinwan sat at the table, drinking milk and looking at her cell phone. It didn't take long before she felt as if someone had been staring at her. She turned to look out, only to see a young woman in a blue custom-made coat standing by the roadside near the overpass. Her eyes fell accurately in Jinwan's direction through the window. The moment their eyes met, Jinwan recognized the woman in the blue coat. It was the woman in the photo last night. She came so quickly? Jinwan raised her eyebrows. Growing up, she had met all kinds of socialites and daughters in the circle, as well as Ji Mengran, who had always been scheming against her. She had been used to so many troublemaking and restless women. She had thought that a woman who had a past with Mo Jingshan would at least be someone who could stay calm. At least, her character and means should be several levels higher. However, to her surprise, the other party didn't seem to have much patience. The woman in the blue coat saw that Jin Wan had looked this way and that Feng Ling, who usually accompanied her, was not sitting opposite her. After a moment of silence, she came over, walked into the milk tea shop, opened the door, and went straight in this direction. At such a close distance, their eyes met. Jin Wan slowly drank the hot milk in the cup. There was a little sugar in the milk, which was sweet but not greasy. It was so delicious that she didn't want to put down the cup. She glanced indifferently at the woman in the blue coat. The woman was about to come over when she suddenly turned to look at Feng Ling, who was lining up in the sweet area. After a moment of hesitation, her eyes fell on Jin Wan again, saying, "Miss Ji, do you want to go to the bathroom with me?" Jin Wan looked at her. This beauty in blue did not just want to go to the bathroom. Her face was full of, "I want to talk to you about a day of fighting." She was not stupid. How could she accompany a woman who was a threat to her to avoid Feng Ling's sight? Besides, she was drinking here. Why should she accompany her to the bathroom? Chapter 323. Su Jilan had heard from Su Shuai that Jin Wan was not someone who could be easily controlled. Seeing that Jin Wan wouldn't stand on the passive side at all, Su Jilan pondered for a moment and then walked over. Jin Wan raised her eyes and said lightly, "Jin Wan." Because of her initiative, the other party smiled politely at her. Su Jilan. What a friendly way to start a self-introduction. Was her surname also Su? Jin Wan asked calmly, "Is Su Shuai yours?" Cousin. Su Jilan's appearance and temperament were both beautiful and aggressive. She was about 1.66 meters tall and wore high heels. Her oval face had a small pointed chin, which made her look even more beautiful. She was wearing a white t-shirt, trousers, and a blue coat. Her hair was permed into a casual and generous light wavy style, which fell behind her shoulders. Standing here, she had a proud and superior temperament and was unrestrained in her beauty. At first glance, one could tell that she was a very flamboyant person. Jin Wan nodded in understanding and slowly uttered a word, "Sit." Then she picked up the glass of milk and took another sip. "There's no need to sit. If it's convenient for you, Miss Ji, let's talk somewhere else." Su Jilan glanced at Jin Wan drinking milk. She had never heard that Jin Wan liked to drink milk, and this was a milk tea shop. It was strange that she would choose pure milk here. But she would never have thought that Jin Wan was pregnant. "No matter where I go, Feng Ling will still follow me." Jin Wan put down the glass and said coldly and slowly, "If you mind Feng Ling's existence very much, I can ask her to rest in another seat and wait for me." Su Jilan looked at Jin Wan calmly for a while, thought about it, and sat down. Jin Wan was very beautiful, which was a well-known fact, but Su Jilan, whom she met for the first time, was also very beautiful. The two women had completely different aesthetics. Sitting here at the same time, they had become a beautiful scenery in this milk tea shop. Many men would take a few glances at them when they passed by. "Miss Ji, you don't seem surprised to see me. It seems that you know why I'm here." Su Jilan didn't keep her guessing and said with a smile, "You're not what I thought." "Really? In what way?" Jin Wan put down her cell phone, raised her eyes, and met Su Jilan's judgmental eyes. There seemed to be a smile in Jin Wan's eyes, but the smile was very shallow. "Su Jilan, a lot. Temperament, character, and attitude when you see me, and so on." Jin Wan's Nguyen Jilan, Mississippi. "Since Miss Su said that I'm different from what you imagined, it seems like you've specially investigated me and understood me. But I'm sorry, before yesterday, I didn't have any general impression of you because no one had mentioned you to me. Not to mention your voice and appearance, I didn't even know about your existence." Jilan, and Su Jilan Su's Lan's words, Su Jilan Lan said. And, smile, Su Jilan, immediately. Su Jilan's ex-girlfriend, who was supposed to be a thorn in Su Jilan's heart, was completely ignored. No one would feel good. After all, she was completely ignored, and she was clearly told that she was the one being ignored. Really? It seems that the people around Jingshan have done a good job of protecting and respecting me. Su Jilan smiled, called the waiter, ordered a glass of water, and took a sip. Jin Wan's cell phone rang. It was a text message. She glanced at it, then half closed her eyes and chuckled. Oh, since you're the one being protected, why did you send me that kind of photo last night, followed me all the way from the hospital to here, and now you're sitting in front of me, breaking the protection circle they built for you? Don't you feel disappointed? Since you've come to Los Angeles, I have to come to see you. Su Jilan was calm and full of smiles in the face of Jin Wan's doubts. Jin Wan said casually, "Do you know what Su Shui did to me when she was in China?" Su Shui looked at her. "I came here today to apologize to you on her behalf. Shui and I grew up together. She's my closest cousin in the Su family. She's less than 20 years old this year, so she was a little impulsive. I hope you don't mind, Miss G, but as far as I know, you haven't really been hurt. Let's forget about this matter, shall we?" Jin Wan glanced at her coldly. "It's not up to me whether we can turn a blind eye to Su Shui's matter or not, but can you explain to me what happened to the wedding dress doll that was sent from America, Miss Su?" After a pause, the smile in Su Jilan's eyes faded. "I thought Miss G was more suitable to communicate in a euphemistic way. At least, you still wanted to save some face and not make it too ugly, but obviously, I overestimated you." Jin Wan casually leaned against the back of the chair, smiling leisurely. Her facial features were like a work of art created by the hands of God. Her skin was white, her lips were red, and her eyes were beautiful. When she came out of the hospital, for convenience's sake, she tied her seaweed-like long hair into a simple ponytail and let it hang behind her head, which made her look more energetic. The ends of her hair hung behind her back, and only 2 strands of hair by her cheeks fell to her shoulders due to the loose hairband, which made Jin Wan's beauty, which was not particularly aggressive, appear much softer. But her eyes were not soft, her tone and her attitude were not soft either. She glanced lazily at the beauty sitting opposite her and said lazily and coldly, "Don't make it sound so dignified. It was you who sent that kind of express delivery. I'm holding you responsible. Miss Su, don't think that everyone has the mood and energy to sit here and play harem tricks with you. Since you're here, just say what you want to say. Don't keep me guessing." Su Jilan sat opposite her, looked at her for a moment, and took out a red velvet box from her bag. "This is the ring we got engaged to Jingshan 3 years ago. Miss G, it seems that you haven't worn a wedding ring on your ring finger since you got married. Do you not like the style of the wedding ring? Why don't you take a look at this? Anyway, I don't need it now. If you like it, I'll give it to you." With that, she opened the red velvet box, and inside was a 5-carat heart-shaped diamond ring. Jin Wan glanced at the thing in the box. It was big, shiny, and beautiful. Chapter 324. But an engagement ring? It stood to reason that Su Jilan, who came from a rich family like Jin Wan, should not be particularly interested in such extravagant and pompous things, but it was clear that Su Jilan was different from her in this respect. Did this Miss Su deliberately pretend to be a little white rabbit in front of her to lower Jin Wan's guard, or was she so naive? She used this kind of thing to disgust people. Jin Wan had to admit that her mood, which had not fluctuated for a long time, was indeed disgusted. Speaking of the wedding ring, Jin Wan was in the wrong. When she and Mo Jingshan got married, she refused to wear it at the wedding and tried to avoid it, but in the end, Mo Jingshan put it on her. But that night, she threw the ring into the drawer of the bedside table in her bedroom. A few months ago, when she was in the Yew Garden, she deliberately went to look for it but couldn't find it. She guessed that Ji Mengran might have taken her wedding ring away when she was living in the Yew Garden. At that time, Jin Wan and Mo Jingshan did not choose that ring together. Instead, grandfather Mo had ordered someone to have it custom-made abroad. The design was very extravagant and flashy, even more so than the one in front of her. Such a large diamond was indeed not the style she liked. With Mo Jingshan's quiet and low-key personality, he would definitely not like this type, so she did not deliberately look for it again. But now Su Jilan discussed her with the reason that she hadn't worn a wedding ring. Jin Wan didn't speak for a while. Feng Ling had seen what was going on here after buying the cake. When she saw Su Jilan, she planned to come over immediately, but when she saw the two of them sitting here and seemed to be chatting calmly, she hesitated and decided not to be nosy, so she waited for a while. However, he only waited for a few minutes before he walked back. Mrs. Mo, the cheesecake was placed in front of Jinwan, and at the same time, she pushed the red velvet box away a little, blocking Jinwan's attention from the ring. Feng Ling said, "Let's go back after eating this cake. It's getting late. Mr. Mo will be worried about you." Feng Ling, long time no see. Su Jilan, who was ignored by Feng Ling, looked at her with a smile. Feng Ling finally turned to look at her and said coldly, "Miss Su." Su Jilan looked at her with a smile, thought for a while, and quietly closed the red velvet box on the table, saying with a smile, "I heard you returned to Los Angeles, but you have been in the hospital these days. Who on earth is sick? I heard from my grandfather and uncle that the hospital is heavily guarded and can't be entered. Is there anyone who is seriously ill?" "Sorry, I'm just Mrs. Mo's bodyguard. I don't know anything else," Feng Ling answered coldly. Su Jilan paused and smiled knowingly. "With your ability, Feng Ling, you're actually willing to be a bodyguard. Is it because Nanheng doesn't take you seriously, or is it Jingshan's idea?" Su Lijilan Su can to say that, Su and Su, to Su, Su to say, said, "Angelus, a Su Su, Su. Miss Su, you worry too much. The relationship between me and Mrs. Mo is not just that of an employer and a bodyguard. We are friends. Although it is my duty to protect her, it is more of my own free will." Su Qingsang smiled coldly and said, "Miss Su, you're right." Su Jilan couldn't help but feel embarrassed when she saw Su Lijilan's attitude. She pursed her lips and suddenly looked at Jinwan. Feng Ling has always been colder and harder than a man. It's rare that you can get used to her. In the past, when I first came into contact with her, I also, "Mrs. M, shall we go back?" Feng Ling interrupted her and looked at Jinwan. Jinwan knew that Feng Ling was not a meddlesome person. She wouldn't intervene in the matter of the legal wife and the ex-girlfriend sitting together, but now Feng Ling obviously didn't want Jinwan and Su Jilan to have more contact. "Okay." Jinwan pushed the uneaten cake in front of her to Su Jilan and smiled at her. "Miss Su, you followed me for so long. Don't come here in vain. There were so many people waiting in line just now. This cake must taste good, and Feng Ling specially waited in line for so long to buy it. We'll go." Seeing that Jinwan stood up and was about to leave, Su Jilan was about to say something, but then she hesitated and said calmly, "We haven't talked much, and it's not dark yet. Why are you in such a hurry, Miss Ji?" Jinwan said, "You've sent me the photos and showed me the ring. Miss Su, no matter how many trump cards you have in your hands, you have to give others some time to prepare. Otherwise it will seem too deliberate, won't it?" Su Jilan didn't speak anymore, just smiled and looked at Jinwan again. However, Feng Ling quickly stood between the two of them, blocking their sight and warning Jinwan to go back with her immediately. Jinwan turned and walked out. When she walked to the door of the hospital, Feng Ling suddenly said, "What did she say to you just now? An ex-girlfriend is an existence that makes people unhappy. There's no need to say anything at all. Just sitting in front of me with a confident expression is enough to disgust me. Is there a need to say anything?" Jinwan said lightly, but she was very generous and said that she would give me her engagement ring. I wondered if she was really so naive. Although I can see that she is a little impulsive, I don't think she is so simple, Feng Ling said seriously. She is indeed not simple. Don't be fooled by her appearance. Jinwan paused and glanced at her. You mean she is clearly a big wolf, but she pretends to be an innocent little rabbit in front of me? Feng Ling looked at her. Just be careful. She is not easy to deal with. The Su family is also powerful, and the force behind them is not simple. Jinwan raised her eyebrows and smiled. So Su Jilan must have come to probe her out today. Chapter 325. Jinwan was not surprised at all. I can see that. A person who deliberately dismembered such a cute and beautiful wedding doll, inserted blades, and mailed it from America to High City, I don't believe that she isn't a sinister person. Then why did you sit with her and chat with her? You clearly knew that she came with a purpose. Jinwan glanced at her and sneered. Who said that only she came to test me, and I couldn't test her? Since she came prepared, How could I not be on guard? Then what did you find out? Well, nothing. I just felt that the diamond ring was really big. When Ji-Nuan returned, the doctor was about to change Mo Jingshan's dressing. Mo Jingshan sat on the bed and took off his clothes. Ji-Nuan entered the door and hesitated, considering whether to enter now or after the doctor left. The doctor was standing by the bed, saying, "Mr. M, please turn around." The man did not move and did not give any response, as though he did not hear her. The doctor repeated, "Mr. Mo, your wound needs to be treated externally every day. Please turn around." He still did not move. The doctor paused and suddenly turned to look at Ji-Nuan, who was standing by the door. Knowing that she was Mr. Mo's wife, he was about to ask her for help when Ji-Nuan came over. Ji-Nuan came to the bed and reached out to put Mo Jingshan's clothes on him, covering only his shoulders and front, revealing his scarred back. Then she gently pushed him to turn around and slowly smoothed the clothes over his shoulders to avoid touching the wound on his back. Mo Jingshan let her do as she pleased, only glancing at the woman's calm face. The doctor glanced at them and was about to come over to apply the medicine, but Mo Jingshan quickly turned away. Seeing his movements, Ji-Nuan immediately frowned. "What are you doing?" The man turned to look at her and then reached out to pull her, completely ignoring the wound on his back. The moment he raised his arm, Ji-Nuan watched as a drop of blood oozed out from the largest suture on his back. "Mo Jingshan." Ji-Nuan's brows furrowed even more. She was about to say something when the man held her waist and pulled her onto his lap. She was forced to sit down. Just now, he had stretched his wound because he had raised his arm. Now his arm was around her waist, and she didn't dare to struggle too much. However, the man's other hand was also holding her tightly in his arms, so she couldn't move. He pressed his lips against her temple, and his voice was low and faint. "I'll apply the medicine later. You go out first." The words were addressed to the doctor. "You apply the medicine first. What can't you say later?" Ji-Nuan still wanted to struggle. She couldn't let his wound have any more problems or delays, but she didn't dare to struggle too much. After moving a few times, she was firmly pressed into his arms. She turned her eyes and glared at him. "Mo Jingshan, you really don't take your health seriously, do you? What if your wound is torn and infected again and again? It sounds like a minor wound, but if you don't deal with it properly, it may cause a full-body infection. If something happens, do you want to stay in the hospital for the rest of your life? Or do you want me to stay with you in the hospital for the rest of your life?" He withdrew his hand from her body. Ji-Nuan was about to get up, but as if regretting, he suddenly raised his hand and held her back. Then the man kissed her on the cheek, and her ears were full of his low chuckle. "Why are you so angry?" Ji-Nuan wanted to roll her eyes. She didn't even see the engagement ring that Su Jilan took out, and now she was even more annoyed to see the blood oozing out of his wound. "Apply the medicine first. I'll sit next to you. I won't leave or disturb the doctor." Seeing his pale face, Ji-Nuan knew that he deliberately wanted her to stay here, but she couldn't bring herself to go back to her ward, so she finally compromised. The stalemate lasted for less than a minute. The man finally let go of her. She withdrew her gaze, got up, sat down with a straight face, and said to the doctor, "Apply the medicine." The doctor nodded and secretly gave Ji-Nuan a thumbs up. Mr. Mo was not a simple person. Doctors like them didn't dare to speak loudly, and if Mr. Mo didn't cooperate, they didn't dare to force him to apply the medicine. However, with just a few words from Mrs. Mo, he obediently turned around and cooperated. While applying the medicine, Ji-Nuan finally had a chance to see the wounds on his back clearly. Although they were sutured well, the wound was too deep, and the wound in the middle of the spine was also deep and large. Although the surgical sutures nowadays were similar to cosmetic needles, and if one was willing to spend money, he probably wouldn't leave any scars, but it would take at least several years for the scars to disappear. She seemed to see the scene when he was hit hard on the back of the hand and the back of the head by the sharp gun butts of the two men. He had been wearing a shirt, and when the doctor treated him, she didn't have the courage to look at the wounds on his back. Now that she saw them, she felt as if a large piece of blood had been dug out of her heart in an instant. She was really distressed. Mo Jingshan was sitting facing Ji-Nuan, and he could see the distress that flashed across her eyes and her slightly red eyes. The softness in the woman's eyes made the man's heart skip a beat. He reached out and held her in his arms. His thin lips kissed her cheek, not too deep or too shallow, and his breath covered more of her skin. Because there was a doctor here, Jinwan turned her head away shyly, but the man's kiss fell directly on her ear, which was her sensitive spot. She shivered and quietly raised her hand to push him in his arms. However, he didn't care that there was a third person present. He kissed her harder and harder, and finally, he held her chin and kissed her hard on the lips. The doctor looked at them as he applied the medicine. He didn't dare to look at them and tried to keep his eyes on Emo Jingshin's back. After hurriedly changing the medicine, he picked up the gauze and wrapped it up, and then left the ward without a word, not daring to disturb him. Kissed by the man, Jinwan gave up struggling. The door of the ward opened and closed. She knew that the doctor had left. Although she was a little embarrassed, it was too late for her to be embarrassed now. She ignored the man's kiss and just asked with a frown, "Why didn't you apply the medicine just now?" "Because I saw you came back and wanted you to stay." His low, husky voice was against her lips. Chapter 326. He lowered his eyes to look at her and lightly curved his lips. "You didn't suddenly go shopping because you were angry?" Jinwan's heart ached. She really didn't want her mood to be affected by a certain someone's presence here. She said, "You're perfectly fine in the hospital. Why would I be angry?" The man gazed at her deeply. "I thought you were soaked in jealousy because of those photos taken at a deliberate angle." She was surprised. "How do you even know what kind of photos I've received on my phone?" PhoneLink's phone is installed with an app that connects to your phone. She won't receive normal messages, but she can see messages from strange numbers or unknown numbers. Emo Jingshin did not hide it. "No wonder, don't you have anything to ask me?" The man looked into her eyes, his handsome face unruffled. "You just said that it's just a few photos taken at a deliberate angle. What else can I ask?" Jinwan turned to pick up the fruit basket that someone had sent over. She took out a fruit knife to cut the fruit and did not say anything more. After she finished cutting the fruit, she turned back and saw that the man was looking at her. His gaze was indifferent and she could not see his emotions. Jinwan did not understand. She cut the fruit into small pieces and put them on the plate. She then used a plastic fruit fork to fork and handed it to him. "Here, have some fruit." The man did not take it, nor did he move. He quietly watched her with his dark eyes. "Are you sure you don't want to ask me anything?" Jinwan picked up a piece of fruit and put it into her mouth with a disapproving expression. "You're a man, not a teenager. It's inevitable that you'll have some past. What else can I ask other than forcing myself to accept it and not pursue it and not letting my imagination run wild? Should I ask you how you felt when you were engaged for the first time? Or when you were dating Miss Su, did you kiss, hug, or sleep with her?" In fact, Jinwan should not have said the latter half of her words. She was just following her heart. Originally, she just wanted to show that she was free and easy. After saying it, she regretted it immediately. However, she could not take back her words. After finishing her words, she avoided the man's gaze and turned to the table with the fruit platter. "You're quite magnanimous." Emo Jingshin's indifferent and unperturbed tone caused one to feel strangely cold. Jinwan did not know why Emo Jingshin suddenly gave her a cold look. She hadn't even had time to adjust her mood, let alone appease Boss Missouri. She put another piece of fruit into her mouth and chewed it hard. She still felt angry and her chest was stuffy. She said she didn't mind. Her words were also very beautiful. But she couldn't completely ignore it. Oh, women. She thought she'd better go back to her ward to be alone and figure out what happened to Sujilan. She put down the fruit plate and the fruit knife and turned to leave. In the end, because she moved too quickly, the fruit knife fell to the ground. She heard it but didn't turn around. Anyway, she didn't use it now. If it fell, then so be it. Someone else would come in and pick it up. "I'll go back to the ward first. I'll come back later." Jinwan did not look at Emo Jingshin and was about to walk out. "You can go." Emo Jingshin's tone was indifferent. The gentleness and passion from when he hugged and kissed her earlier seemed to have faded away. He had once again become the cold and noble COMO that others spoke of. However, he was the more distant and cold COMO that Jinwon rarely interacted with. She paused and walked to the door of the ward. As soon as her hand touched the doorknob, she suddenly heard something. She turned to see Mo Jingshan stand up by the bed. He got up very slowly and with some difficulty, and his pale face was still cold. Seeing him get up to pick up the fruit knife, she frowned and hurriedly walked back to pick it up and put it on the table. The man's movements paused, and he raised his eyes to look at her. "I was in a bad mood just now. I didn't want to disturb you. Have a good rest in bed. Don't get out of bed and walk around," Jinwon said and turned around. "If you're in a bad mood, ask what you want to ask. Why don't you keep your words in your heart?" The man's eyes were deep. He looked at her face and forced her to stop. "You're in a bad mood?" "It's not that I'm in a bad mood. I just don't want to be too stubborn and want to think clearly." Mo Jingshan retreated to the bedside and slowly sat down. Clearly, the action of sitting down would affect the injury on his back. It was slightly strenuous. His brows furrowed slightly before he turned to look at her. "What are you trying to do? Tell me, let me hear it. Right now, the most important thing is your health. There's no need to worry too much." Jinwon chuckled uncomfortably. "I don't want to vent my jealousy on you. Can you let me calm down first?" Hearing the words, jealousy, Mo Jingshan couldn't help smiling. "Come here." Jinwon didn't want to go over, but seeing that he was about to stand up again, she hurriedly walked over. As soon as she approached, he held her waist with one hand and pulled her into his arms again. Jinwon wanted to get up, but he didn't move. He tightened his arms and kissed her brows. "Nwan." Mo Jingshan planted another light kiss on the corner of her lips. The smile in his voice could not be concealed. "You're jealous. Since I saw it, I can't pretend that nothing happened. Earlier, your nonchalant attitude was intentional, right? If you care, then care. Why are you pretending to be indifferent?" "I can't say that I'll really be jealous of an ex-girlfriend, and there's really nothing wrong with those photos." "You shouldn't be jealous," Mo Jingshan said frankly. Mo Jingshan said frankly, "Nothing happened between me and her. We didn't fall in love or kiss. Even the engagement was arranged by Shine Group. I just went through the motions, but not long after, the engagement was cancelled. Between me and her, it was never what you think." Jinwon hadn't recovered from his words when she suddenly heard the man say in a low and heavy voice, "You just said that you don't mind that I have a so-called past, that you don't mind that I've kissed, hugged, or even slept with others, and?" Jinwon, you're really magnanimous." Mo Jingshan suddenly chuckled. There was an indescribable danger in his tone. "So, should I think of a way to give you a surprise? If I really had such a woman, I should really let the two of you have a good fight and see who's more powerful." Jinwon, no. She stiffened in his arms and shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not." Chapter 327. Just now, I was just speaking casually. Speaking casually? You can make your words sound so absolute? Mo Jingshan looked at her, his tone as cold as frost. "You wish for a woman to lean on me like you do, to have the right to control my emotions and body, and I will do my best to satisfy her. You wish for such a person?" He then said coldly, "Or, I can arrange a place for her like the Yew Garden. We can sleep in the morning and wake up at dusk, have 3 meals together, live together, and be more like you. On the sofa, on the bed, on the carpet, in the bathroom, in every corner of the room, we are intimately intimate. Would you still say you don't mind? Would you hesitate even if you want to be jealous?" Was this man deliberately using a knife to cut her heart? From the moment Jinwon received the photo last night to the moment she saw the ring, she kept telling herself not to be angry, not to mind, and that it was all right. But it turned out that a person's possessiveness could be so strong. It was so strong that even an analogy, an assumption, was like a blunt knife slowly grinding against her bones. The sharp pain seemed to instantly spread to her limbs and bones. "Jinwon, can you accept all this magnanimously?" "Jinwon, Wasn't he referring to herself as the one who wanted to save face and suffer? Ji-Wan suddenly seemed to deflate. She directly leaned her head against the man's shoulder, softly saying, "I'm not willing. You can only belong to me." Screw his rationality. Screw his pride. Her own husband was hidden by herself. She would never give up this position to anyone who wanted to snatch it away. She raised her hands to hug his neck tightly, burying her face in his neck. She breathed in the clear scent of disinfectant on his body and snuggled even tighter in his embrace. Her voice was muffled as she said against his neck, "If you dare to treat other women so well, I won't be able to get over it. Mo Jingshan, let me tell you, between us, we will only be separated by death after 100 years. There will never be a separation of life." Mo Jingshan abruptly held her chin, bending down to kiss her lips harshly. As he sucked on her lips repeatedly, he bit down on the tip of her tongue. She trembled and heard the man say hoarsely against her lips, "Remember what you said earlier." Which one? The last one. Ji-Wan couldn't tell when she began to kiss Mo Jingshan. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't move because of his injury, and if it weren't for the fact that she was pregnant, this man would have pressed her down on the hospital bed and done something to her. But even so, the man still tried his best not to tear his wound while pressing his body against hers. Ji-Wan originally wanted to say that this was a ward and that someone could come in at any moment, but the man's kiss was domineering and firm, accurately pressing against her lips. At first, he thought it was just a kiss, but it got out of hand. It wasn't until the buttons on the patient's gown were undone and the man's kiss landed on her fair neck that she suddenly shivered because of this unique stimulation. She gradually returned the kiss with her impulsive calmness. "Ugh, don't." The man ignored her resistance and said, "Don't move. This is a ward, and I'm pregnant." The man didn't say anything as he kissed her lips and cheeks. "Jingsh, you're still injured." Ugh. It didn't matter if she was injured. What mattered was that she was pregnant and couldn't be touched in the first 3 months. Ji-Wan had just experienced a rush and now had to take good care of her body. She couldn't be careless at all, and she couldn't stand any more torment. The man pressed against her tightly, imprisoned her freedom, and kissed her collarbone and her shoulder. If he hadn't been injured, Ji-Wan would have pushed him away, but now she could only struggle carefully. Footsteps passed by from time to time outside the ward. Every time this sound approached, Ji-Wan would stiffen nervously, but the more she did this, the more the man's body rubbed against hers. They hadn't hugged each other deeply for so long, and her desire for him was no less than his, both mentally and physically. What's more, his kisses kept rolling over her neck, collarbone, and ears, making her calm and self-control gradually collapse. Mo Jingshan was obviously still rational. He restrained himself from continuing, but after all, he was very familiar with all the sensitive points of her body, and the two of them hadn't been together for a long time, so Ji-Wan quickly reacted. She whimpered under his touch and kiss. She abruptly buried her face in his neck, unable to suppress her breathing. She hoarsely begged, "Jingshan, you don't miss me?" The man kissed her cheek, pressed his lips against hers, and said hoarsely in a low voice, "This taste, it's really torture." The man's fingers had almost peeled off her hospital gown. The more turbulent he was, the faster he recovered his reason. His thin lips pressed against her ear, and he coaxed in a low voice, "Sleep here with me tonight. Don't make me call you to come over again. I can't touch you or eat you, but at least let me hold you and see you." Ji-Wan's cheeks were hot from the man's teasing, and she slowly nodded against his neck. The two of them spent the whole night in bed. To be exact, Ji-Wan was pressed on the bed by Mo Jingshan. Although it was inconvenient for him to do too much because of his injury, hugs and kisses were enough. Ji-Wan didn't know that a simple kiss could last for a long time. For example, a kiss could last for at least half an hour, and it didn't even feel monotonous. Ji-Wan didn't feel that she slept for long, but when she opened her eyes again, there was some light in the ward, which shone through the curtains and cast a dazzling light on the white quilt. "You're awake." The man's voice came from her side. Ji-Wan turned her head and saw that Mo Jingshan, who was leaning against the headboard, had closed his laptop. He was only wearing the hospital gown loosely, and there was a suspicious red kiss mark on his neck, which was particularly eye-catching on his recently pale skin. Of course, Jinwan knew who did it. Although they did not do anything last night on this bed, after being teased for so long, she could not help but kiss him, nibble him, and bite him. She glanced at him and quickly shifted her gaze away. "What are you shy about?" Her little movement was naturally caught by the man, who chuckled. Chapter 328. Why didn't you say you were embarrassed when you kissed me last night? The man deliberately pulled open his clothes to show her the hickeys on his chest. "You bit me too," Jinwan argued in a low voice, but still reached over to tug at his clothes and buttoned him up one by one. However, even the top button couldn't cover the obvious hickey on his neck. "Really?" Mo Jingshan asked pretentiously and reached out to lift Jinwan's clothes. "Let me see." Jinwan was afraid that he would ignite the fire in her again early in the morning, so she rushed to lift the quilt and get out of bed. Mo Jingshan was injured and couldn't chase after her, so he didn't insist. He watched the little woman run out of the door with a blushing face as she fastened her clothes. However, Jinwan ran so fast that she forgot to take her cell phone. Before she opened the door, she suddenly heard the cell phone she left by his bed ring. She paused and looked back to see that the man was holding her cell phone calmly and looking at her. Jinwan rushed back. When she took the cell phone from his hand, she saw that it was Xiao Ba's number. She quickly cleared her throat and answered the call. "Hello. Boss Nguyen, are you up? It should be morning in the United States, right?" Xiao Ba asked cheerfully. "Yes, I'm up." Jinwan looked at the time. It was getting late in China. At least, it was time to get off work. Recently, the price of housing and land in China have been rising. The resources in our studio have been attracted by many big companies. These days, our conference room is almost full. Many people have come to bid for the studio. Sister Xia Tian said that when you come back, you can consider moving the studio out of Jin Lin building and change to a formal, independent office building. Otherwise, those people who come to us with money will have no place to sit. Xiao Ba said with a smile. "Boss, before you come back, shall we help you find a suitable place in High City to move the studio?" It was already January, and the Chinese New Year was coming. In the new year, the trend of domestic housing prices had gradually begun to rise. I'll take a look when I get back." "It's already so late and you're still not off work?" "No, Sister Xia Tian left a little earlier today. She handed over some of the work on hand to me for the time being. I can get off work in about half an hour." "What is she doing?" Little Eighth suddenly chuckled. "Dating Jinwan." She suddenly raised her eyebrows. "What kind of relationship does she have?" The last time Sister Xia Tian injured someone with her walking stick and was taken away by the police station, the police officer who interrogated her was also transferred from S City, and he was a special police officer who was temporarily transferred here. Xia Tian's family is also in S City, right? Recently, the two of them have been in close contact. Before Jinwan could come back to herself, Xiao Ba said that she was going to print some documents and get ready to get off work, so she hung up the phone. Jinwan held the phone for a long time before she understood. What was going on? Was this someone's spring? Xia Tian, who she had always been worried about, had finally opened up a new line of love, instead of maintaining the path of the scumbag from her previous life. But who was the police officer in the police station last time? At that time, the matter was too complicated and rushed, and she did not pay much attention to what the police officer in the interrogation room looked like. Tiske, this woman Xia Tian actually made big news behind her back. No wonder she did not often send text messages to harass her these days. It turned out that she had changed the target of her complaints. Mo Jingshan lazily leaned against the headboard, watching Jinwan's somewhat complicated expression as though her good sister was about to be taken away by a wolf. "The studio is moving to a new location?" The man's light words brought Jinwan back to herself. Jinwan hurriedly shifted her gaze away from the hickey on his neck, and after a moment of silence, she said, "Previously, the office location in Jin Lin building was only a temporary one. Now that there are more frequent investors and bidders, the environment of my small studio is indeed not good enough. If we really want to change the location, we may have to consider moving to a place near the construction bureau. That way, it will be closer and more convenient when we go to apply for documents in the future. Let Qin Siding help you choose a location. He often contacts people from the construction bureau. Mo Jingshan looked at Jin Wan's serious expression and chuckled softly. Dr. Qin? Will it be too much trouble for him? He can't wait for you to trouble him, Mo Jingshan casually said. Recently, Shida Group has been making a lot of noise in China. The Qin family and Shida Group happen to be working together. He and his old love should see each other often. In these dark days, it's good to find something else for him to do. In the afternoon, Jin Wan went back to the ward to take a shower while Mo Jingshan was receiving an anti-inflammatory injection. In the past few days, she had been quite idle in the hospital. She ate, slept, bathed, and accompanied her husband. She didn't have to face the storm-like dangers of the past few days, nor did she have endless work waiting for them as soon as she opened her eyes in High City. However, when Jin Wan was taking a shower, she did not know that an uninvited guest suddenly came to the hospital. Mo Jingshan's injection was halfway through, and K of 11 base was in charge of guarding outside the ward area with several brothers. Not long after, K suddenly knocked on the door and came in. Mr. Mo, Miss Su is here. Mo Jingshan was still a little pale, but his face was cold and calm. Didn't Nan Heng tell you that no one from the Su family is allowed to come in? I know, so I didn't let Miss Su enter your ward area. She waited outside for a while. Seeing that we didn't let her in, she just left. Mo Jingshan closed his eyes again, and Kay suddenly remembered something and said, by the way, just now, after Miss Su left, our men saw her go to Mrs. Mo's ward area. Although there are people guarding there, they used to be friends with Miss Su, so they may let her in. Mo Jingshan opened his eyes again and looked coldly at Kay. As soon as he met Mo Jingshan's cold eyes, Kay had a hunch that things were not good, so he immediately shut up and did not dare to say more. Mo Jingshan suddenly sat up, quickly pulled out the needle on the back of his hand under Kay's startled gaze, and lifted the quilt to get out of bed. However, because the surgical wound on his back hadn't healed after 3 days, his face turned pale because of the pain. Kay rushed to stop him, but Mo Jingshan had already gotten out of bed. Ignoring the trace of blood on the back of his hand dripping down the blood vessels because he pulled out the needle too quickly, he walked out expressionlessly. Chapter 329. Jin Wan was not surprised that Su Jilan came to the hospital. What was strange was that she couldn't sit still. They had just met in the milk tea shop, but in the blink of an eye, she came straight to the hospital? Jin Wan had just come out of the bathroom in the ward. Her hospital gown was a little loose, and the collar had not been completely fastened. She was drying her hair, when she suddenly saw Su Jilan, who had pushed the door open and come in. Miss Su. The moment she saw the other party, Jin Wan glanced at her in surprise. Su Jilan stood at the door of the ward and saw that Jin Wan had just taken a shower. She suddenly saw a red mark on Jin Wan's open chest. Her eyes flickered and she looked away, saying calmly, I thought someone was sick. I didn't expect that Miss G also has a ward. Do you have a cold or are you not feeling well? I heard you were here, so I came to see you. Did I disturb you? Of course not, but if you had come a few minutes earlier, I might still be in the bathroom. Jin Wan dried her hair again, put down the towel, and casually tidied up her clothes, saying indifferently, Miss Su, what's your purpose in coming to the hospital? I heard that Jingshan was injured? Jin Wan didn't stop smoothing her cuffs. She didn't even lift her eyelids. Who told you the news? Su Jilan smiled. I have some connections with several people in Nanhang's base. After all, the Su family also has an important position in the American arms trade, but the Su family doesn't rely entirely on this business, so they haven't been involved in it in recent years. But 11 Base used to have a close relationship with the Su family, so it's not difficult for me to get some information from these acquaintances. Jin Wan didn't respond and continued to smooth the creases on her cuffs. Last night, Mo Jingshan had pressed on her for almost the entire night. Her arm had been pressed down by him the entire time. Her clothes had clearly been washed yesterday, and she had just gotten a new set from the hospital. Yet, after one night, it had become so wrinkled. Those who didn't know better would think that she had not changed her clothes for many days. Seeing that she was always so gentle and indifferent, Su Jilan suddenly smiled. Miss Ji, you should know Jingshan's injury, right? Is he seriously injured? So many people from 11 base are guarding the hospital, and I heard that even Officer Ensa's men have been alarmed. I'm very worried about Jingshan's injury. If you're worried, just go to visit him. What are you doing here? Jin Wan raised her lips and looked at her with a faint smile. Miss Su, since you're so familiar with the people in the base and treat them like your own people, I'm sure the people guarding outside his ward won't dare to stop you. You can visit him if you want. There's no need to explain to me about this kind of courtesy visit in the hospital. I won't mind an old friend of my husband's visit. Su Jilan looked at Jin Wan, and after a moment of silence, she said, their base is filled with new blood all year round, and there must be some people who don't know me. It's not convenient for me to go there rashly. What if I'm stopped? Jin Wan home. And Su Jilan. G of her heart. G of Jilan. She of it. He had already experienced the awkwardness, so why did he come to her place to show his existence? New blood? The people on duty outside Mo Jingshan's ward were all veterans of the base like Feng Ling Kei, and the others had been with Nanheng for many years. How could they not know Su Jilan? That's true. It's indeed quite awkward to be blocked outside the door by someone you think you're close to. When she sat down, she picked up her cell phone and said absent-mindedly as she looked at the news that popped up on her cell phone, I don't have anything to visit here. Besides, Miss Su, I'm not very familiar with you. Now that you've seen me, the air in the hospital is not good, you'd better go back early. I'll tell Jingshan about your visit. We appreciate your kindness. Jinwan didn't mean to be polite to her at all. She didn't even ask her to find a place to sit in the ward. However, Su Jilan had no intention of leaving. She moved to the bedside and pointed to the chair on the opposite side. May I sit down? Jinwan was still looking at her phone. Without lifting her eyelids, she calmly responded, if you want to sit, then sit. Miss Ji seems to be afraid of me. Su Jilan took a look at her, took a chair, and sat down, sitting opposite Jinwan in a dignified manner. Hearing this, Jinwan burst out laughing. I don't want to say too much, lest I hurt you. Su Jilan raised her eyebrows and was about to speak, when Jinwan put down her cell phone and looked up at her. Although Jinwan's hair was slightly wet and scattered on her back, and she looked particularly fresh and clean after taking a shower. Compared with Su Jilan's beauty, Jinwan's attitude was neither hurried nor slow. In such a situation, Su Jilan couldn't guess what Jinwan was thinking. She had personally tested Jinwan's bottom line and learned from Su Shui that Jinwan was a woman who looked simple but was not easy to deal with. It turned out that Jinwan was not affected by the photos and the ring at all. Su Jilan hesitated and suddenly went straight to the point. Miss Ji, you said you never knew of my existence before you received those photos, so do you know who I am now? Jinwan glanced at her and lazily sneered. You've already introduced yourself and taken out the engagement ring. There's no need to repeat your self-introduction. I'm not interested in your name and identity and have the patience to listen to it too many times. Seeing the calm look on her face, Su Jilan paused for a moment, then suddenly curled her lips and said, Miss Ji, although I didn't come with good intentions, I admit that my purpose is Jingshan. No one can accept the fact that a man you once loved has become the husband of a woman who came out of nowhere, but your attitude shows that you just want to cling to Mo Jingshan, and you don't care whether he has had other women or not, right? Ji Yunshu said, Miss Ji, although I didn't come with good intentions, I admit that my purpose is Jingshan. Chapter 330. Jinwan had thought that Su Jilan was going to play this roundabout game with her for a while, and she thought this Miss Su was strange and not decisive enough. Sure enough, people who were spoiled from childhood all had a common problem, that was, they didn't have enough patience. I'm afraid even Miss Su isn't qualified to say whether I'm the exception or not. Jinwan smiled, but there was no smile in her eyes. But I checked the ring on the internet that day. It's a masterpiece by a famous jewelry designer in the United States. It's indeed expensive, but I heard that the ring was auctioned by the Su family at a charity party. Later, the Su family took it and engraved the letters as "An" on the ring, which represent you and Mo Jingshan, but it doesn't seem to be a real engagement ring. Ji Nuan tilted her head slightly, and her voice was indifferent and languid. As a woman, seeing another woman so stubbornly in love with her husband, and even carefully treasuring a meaningless ring with just an extra letter M on it for many years, it shows that my husband is still as charming as ever no matter how many years have passed. She paused for a few seconds and continued, but marriage is marriage. Miss Su, even if you used to love him fiercely, that's a thing of the past. Why do you have to hold on to a shadow that you can't reach at all? Su Jilan's face suddenly darkened. The ring was like a thorn in her heart. She had tried to show off, but in the blink of an eye, it became a kind of humiliation. She smiled calmly, and her delicate makeup and eyebrows were shrouded in a glaring mockery. When a person's confidence reaches a certain level, it's really hard to wake him up. Tell me, you don't even know who your biological father is? But you're the miss of the Ji family. What right do you have to stand by Mo Jingshan's side? Oh, now you can squander your confidence and scrupulously with the title of Mrs. Mo. Are you sure that a man like Jingshan will like you? If he didn't have other reasons, how could he marry you as soon as he returned to High City? Ji Nuan was still smiling lightly, and no one could tell what she was thinking. Su Jilan stared at her, and the aggression in her eyes was very obvious. Before I got together with Jingshan, he had never been intimate with any woman, and I was the man who broke all his firsts. As for you, you just happened to get married at the right time. As I said just now, if his wife were any other woman, he would treat her very well. You're not special, so don't be too confident. A man will always have a woman in his heart, but that woman obviously won't be you. Ji Nuan raised her eyebrows and said in a clear voice, "You're standing in front of a man's legitimate wife and talking about feelings and the past with me? Just how desperate are you that you would use such a method to attack me?" Facing Ji Nuan's unwavering attitude, Su Jilan's eyes turned cold. "I'm reminding you to know what's good for you." Hearing this, Ji Nuan was about to sneer when she heard Su Jilan say coldly again, "Jingshan was seriously injured many years ago, and I stayed with him in the hospital to take care of him for a long time. Our relationship has always been stable. Now you accompany him day and night in the hospital. Have you ever thought that maybe he just regards you as my shadow?" Hearing this, Ji Nuan suddenly smiled. "A shadow that can't even enter his ward? As a shadow, your sense of existence is too low." As soon as Su Jilan saw Ji Nuan's smile, she felt uncomfortable all over and tried to poke at her heart word by word. "He won't have too much contact with any woman after marrying you because of his responsibility for his marriage. I know him very well. Mo Jingshan is a very principled and disciplined man, and his self-restraint is not comparable to that of ordinary people. Marriage is his shackles. Since he entered this prison, he has bound himself to this responsibility. But you can't guess whether he is willing to do this or not. Can you?" Ji Nuan's smile made Su Jilan feel uncomfortable all over, and she tried to poke at her heart with each word. "I don't need to guess." Ji Nuan was not hurt at all. She smiled carelessly and indifferently. "In my world, as long as sweet things are sweet enough, I don't need to worry about whether the saccharin will become bitter or not. This kind of behavior of asking for trouble is usually the thinking of a psychopath. I'm a simple-minded person, and no one can instill any negative emotions in me. Miss Su, I advise you to give up on me. If you have time, you'd better find a way to ask Kay to let you go in and talk to Mo Jingshan alone. Of course, that is, if you can get in." Su Jilan stared at Ji Nuan, her fingers hidden under her bag gradually clenching. Ji Nuan could see that she was really anxious. She was anxious to take advantage of their return to Los Angeles to do something, to take back something, or to leave something in Mo Jingshan's life that had nothing to do with her at all. What? Su Jilan planned to become a snowball in Ji Nuan's heart step by step, and then roll in her heart like a snowball until it became an existence that could not be ignored. Because in this way, as long as Ji Nuan chose to quit, Mo Jingshan would no longer have the shackles and obstacles of marriage, and everything would be much easier. Unfortunately, Mo Jingshan had never given Jinwan a chance to have such a boring place in her heart. He would never allow any unforeseen accidents or misunderstandings. He had said all that should be said and explained, and he had always been as honest as he should be. As far as I know, the Ji family's status in High City is not as good as before, is it? Su Jilan stood up, walked slowly in the ward as if carelessly, and turned to look at Jinwan. In this situation for the Su family, it's as easy as pinching an ant to make the Ji family go bankrupt. Now most of the industries in China are somewhat redundant, and it's very easy to replace something. What do you want to replace? For example, a few department stores that don't seem to have a good future, a listed company that is in debt, or… like what? Suddenly, a low, cold voice rang from the door of the ward. Hearing this voice, Su Jilan, who was standing by the bed facing Jinwan, suddenly paused and turned to look at Mo Jingshan, who had appeared out of nowhere. Jinwan didn't expect that Mo Jingshan would come. He couldn't leave the ward easily because of his injury, and wasn't he taking an injection just now? Why was he here? Kay didn't dare to speak after entering the door and stood behind Mo Jingshan. Chapter 331. Mo Jingshan's eyes were dark and indifferent, but his indifferent eyes soon made Su Jilan feel a chill from the soles of her feet to the top and spread all over her body. Jinwan's smile disappeared because of his appearance. Who let you out of the ward? Jingshan. After several years, she finally saw him standing in front of her instead of watching the financial news. Su Jilan's composure suddenly cracked, and her eyes were glued to him. The man was dressed in a light blue hospital gown. He was as cold and handsome as ever. His face was obviously pale, but the coldness in the man's eyes was almost seeping out. He looked at her calmly with his dark eyes, without the slightest bit of politeness that an old friend should have. Seeing Mo Jingshan's pale face and the faint blood on the back of his hand, Jinwan guessed how he came here. Her heart clenched and she was about to get up to help him, but the woman in blue standing by the bed in front of her quickly walked up to him. Jingshan, how are you hurt? Where on earth did you come back from? How did you get hurt like this? Su Jilan looked concerned. She had come up to the man and was about to reach out to help him, when the man in front of her glanced at her coldly. Su Jilan's hand, which was about to touch his arm, paused and hesitated before putting it down, but she clenched the bag in her hand. She couldn't hide the concern in her eyes, and her voice was gentle and sweet, not as cold and arrogant as when she was talking to Jinwan. I heard that you've been in this hospital for several days. You still look so pale after so many days. Were you hurt? Is it very serious? Is it more serious than that time? What did you just say? Mo Jingshan didn't answer her question but asked back in a low voice. The man's handsome face was calm and indifferent, and his eyes were distant and distant. In Su Jilan's view, his indifference was so sharp and silent that her nerves were trembling. What can I say? I came to see Miss Ji and care about the relationship between you and her. After all, I've been through it. After a moment of silence, Su Jilan suddenly gave a natural smile and stared at the man's face, refusing to let go of any expression on his face, even if it was indifferent. Mo Jingshan was cold and indifferent. He did not plan on answering her words. He said softly, "Recently, Elder Su's thoughts haven't been in the right place. You clearly know that my place is a forbidden area to your Su family, but you still turn a blind eye to it and barge in?" Being completely ignored in front of Jinwan, Su Jilan had to calm down even if she was embarrassed. She looked at him, suddenly smiled, and then turned to Jinwan, whose face had darkened because of Mo Jingshan's appearance. After all, it's rare for you to be injured and hospitalized. I have more experience in taking care of you than Miss Ji. When you were in a coma, I had been watching over you. Now that I heard you were here and in the same hospital, I had to come and see you. Mo Jingshan didn't say anything at first. He just glanced at her coldly and then said in a cold voice, "If I remember correctly, when I was in a coma, I was taken care of by Nanheng's men. Miss Su occasionally appeared when I was in a coma. I don't know if you have experience in taking care of people, but Miss Ji is my wife. It's natural for her to take care of me. Don't you worry too much?" Su Jilan didn't speak. When she heard Mo Jingshan say that Jin Wan was his wife, her eyes were fixed on him. After a few seconds of silence, she said, Jingshan, what I care about most now is your physical condition. As for who your wife is, Miss Ji has just repeatedly emphasized this matter to me. She has been reminding me all the time that she is now the winner. You are so injured and I have no time to think about other things. The most important thing is you. Mo Jingshan's tone was still indifferent. Do I need her to emphasize who my wife is to you again and again? Isn't it obvious to everyone? What I mean is, Miss G might be afraid that I might pose a threat to her, so she kept emphasizing her body. Really? But why did I hear you just list a few examples in front of my wife? Mo Jingshan's dark eyes coldly swept over Su Shui's face. For example, using your most common means to control people with power and money? Do you think her temper is so soft that she would allow you to bully her like this? Didn't you see what happened to Su Shui? It doesn't matter if you lose a cousin, but do you want to lose yourself as well? Jin Wan really didn't think she was bullied. After all, she and Su Jilan were evenly matched. But when she suddenly heard these words from Mo Jingshan's mouth, she was so moved that she almost burst into tears. Su Jilan stared at the man's cold eyes. You won't hurt me. At this time, the door of the ward was suddenly opened, and Nanheng, who had been listening outside for a long time, was standing there with his eyebrows raised. I'm sorry. I found that no one was in the ward upstairs, so I came here to have a look, only to hear such a big drama. Nanheng glanced around with a faint smile and finally rested his eyes on Su Jilan, saying flatly, I advise Miss Su to stay away from Jin Wan. Mo Jingshan treasures his wife very much. Let alone your threats, even if you appear in front of Jin Wan and affect her mood, it's enough to make him very unhappy with you. Su Jilan's eyebrows twitched. Obviously, she didn't expect that they all knew about the photos. Besides, Nanheng raised his hand and casually tidied up his cuffs. There was a cold sneer on the corner of his mouth, and he said slowly, We didn't touch you back then because the Su family still had a certain status in the American arms industry. Both of us kept each other in check and were in the same boat. If the Su family didn't act rashly, we wouldn't either. But now, in order to protect himself, Elder Su has handed over everything in his hands. He was willing to be abandoned to protect the Su family's small territory in the business world. He has gotten what he wanted, but he has lost the condition to keep us in check. Hearing this, Su Jilan's suppressed calmness seemed to crack. She looked up at Mo Jingshan, who had been indifferent all this time. Chapter 332. Su Jilan's fingers trembled silently. She stared at the man with cold eyes in front of her. My grandfather was forced to hand over those management rights because of you? Kay couldn't bear to listen anymore. Although he had met Miss Su before, when he saw her questioning Mr. Mo in such an attitude, he couldn't help interrupting. Miss Su, Mr. Mo has been very kind to your Su family. If it weren't for the fact that Elders Su and Shine Group had a lot of mutual ties, the Su family would have faced more than just handing over the management rights. But Miss Su, it's not right for you to keep pestering him. You should have known it when Mr. Mo left the United States. I don't understand. Su Jilan bit her lower lip and stared at Mo Jingshan's calm face. So, was I used by you? You want to use me to break through the last barrier between you and the Su family? You want to ruthlessly squeeze the evenly matched party in your hands? Right now, the Su family can only be at the peak of their power in the righteous path, but they are blocked by you on the other path? Mo Jingshan's thin lips said calmly, I didn't use you. Wasn't it Miss Su's deliberate deception? When did I deceive you? Su Jilan's face suddenly tightened. Mo Jingshan's lips curved imperceptibly. When I was in a coma for many days, when I woke up, you stood in the ward and told a lie with my father. Don't you remember? Su Jilan paused. You mean, I said I rescued you from the Los Angeles River? Jin Wan, who hadn't participated in these things and had been a little confused, suddenly turned to look at Su Jilan. Mo Jingshan indifferently withdrew his gaze from Su Jilan's face. In order to cooperate with my father's selfish desire to keep me in the United States, The Su family and he made up a lie together, using the so-called kindness and friendship to facilitate our relationship. The corners of Emo Jingshan's lips lifted, his eyes filled with mockery. Since you have the guts to fabricate lies in front of me, you should be able to accept my way of repaying you. The Su family was shrewd, and I cooperated with you effortlessly. Coincidentally, the Su family had something I wanted, so I patiently played with you for 2 years. At the end of the day, Miss Su was used by her own grandfather. Even if this dirty water were to be poured on me, it wouldn't be my turn. Su Zhilan couldn't help but tremble harder. She wanted to say something, but when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she couldn't say them. She just looked at the man in front of her with red eyes. Why are you so sure that I was lying back then? At that time, you were covered in blood and barely had a breath left. I really drove there and sent you to the hospital. Jing Shen, I can understand that you have prejudice against the Su family, but you can't deny my feelings for you. Are you sure you want to continue making up this useless story? Emo Jingshan's cold voice rang in front of her. Due to his poor condition, the man's voice was low and cold. Jin Wan sat on the bed, silently wanting to swear. Although it might not be particularly important whether she had saved him or not, and she really didn't take it to heart, what they had experienced for so long could not be summed up by such a small thing. But Miss Su was really confident to lie so blatantly. She didn't expect that the man was sitting here watching, did she? Emo Jingshan's attitude was so firm and cold that all the explanations on the tip of Su Zhilan's tongue seemed to become so tasteless in an instant. She was silent for a moment, looked at the man's eyes that were as calm as the sea, and gradually softened her voice. Jingshan, no matter what the reason is, we used to be together. You can't be so heartless. Emo Jingshan's lips curved into a cold smile. Before you sent Jin Wan that doll in the wedding dress, if I had touched the Su family in the slightest, I would have been heartless. The warning in his words was clear enough. Touching Jin Wan was tantamount to touching his bottom line. He could do heartless things once and twice. Even if he was accused of being heartless, he would not let go of the Su family easily. Su Zhilan couldn't help saying, Miss Ji is not a child. Why is she so delicate? It's just a prank. Can a few blades turn the world upside down? She then said unwillingly with red eyes, even what Su Shui did was just to fight for me. But all of you were so ruthless towards her that it's already a miracle that she's still alive. And you just strangled the Su family's lifeline, made it difficult for the Su family to move forward, and had my grandfather lock me up. Emo Jingshan, I've been by your side for 2 years, loved you, and waited for you for so many years, and this is how you treat me? Emo Jingshan closed his eyes, and there was a trace of paleness and impatience between his brows. Su Zhilan saw that he couldn't bear it for so long. After a moment of silence, she softened her voice. Jingshan, don't be angry. I'll help you back to the ward first. You're still. With that, she hurriedly reached out to help him. Mrs. Emo. Kay suddenly winked at Jin Wan. Seeing that Emo Jingshan avoided Su Zhilan's hand, but Su Zhilan insisted on helping him, Jin Wan pursed her lips, got up, and put her hand on Emo Jingshan's arm. Emo Jingshan leaned toward her. Obviously, he couldn't hold on any longer. How many times has the doctor told you not to get out of bed these days? Did you pull out the needle yourself? Don't you feel any pain at all? Jin Wan was standing closest to Emo Jingshan now. When most of the man's body almost leaned toward her, she couldn't help muttering beside him, what if the wound has a problem again? Aren't you afraid that the wound will be inflamed repeatedly, leading to infection and fever, and finally burn into a fool? Kay, who was standing behind, she was really Xiao Mo's wife. Why didn't she learn to be gentler than Miss Su at a time like this? How could she insult Mr. Emo? Su Zhilan watched Emo Jingshan leaning against Jin Wan defenselessly and suddenly looked at Jin Wan's face. For a moment, Jin Wan seemed to see some kind of determination and coldness in her eyes. Although it flashed away, obviously she was not the only one who saw it. Chapter 333. Jin Wan raised her hand and held Emo Jingshan's arm, noticing that at that moment, he seemed to have intentionally moved in front of her. She remembered that Feng Ling had said that Miss Su had intermittent mania, but Su Jilan couldn't be so irrational as to do anything out of line in such a place. At the same time, Mo Jingshan took Jin Wan's hand and held it, silently giving her a sense of steadiness and peace, not letting her be affected by these things. Their movements didn't escape Su Jilan's eyes. Su Jilan looked at their interlocked hands and said bitterly, "Jingshan, we've been together for 2 years. I've worked overtime with you, and I've gone on business trips with you. You and I have experienced as much as Jin Wan. I've been honest with you. I didn't mean to lie to you, but it's unfair for you to deny my feelings for you. I've been waiting for you for so many years. Enough." Mo Jingshan's pale face added more indifference to his clear and cold look. Starting with a lie is doomed to have no ending. Miss Su's feelings are just your obsession. I don't owe you anything, and I don't need to be responsible for you. Don't embarrass yourself too much. Miss Su. Kay consciously took it as Mr. Mo's order, so he immediately approached Su Jilan and said politely, "Mr. and Mrs. Mo are not in good health now. Please leave." Su Jilan nodded and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Mo, please leave." Su Jilan still wanted to speak, but Kay stood in front of her. Su Jilan's hands kept shaking. She tried to control her emotions, but the sadness in her eyes was very obvious. The atmosphere here was really not good for her. She took a deep breath and said, "Okay, I'll go back. Jingshan, take care of yourself. When you're discharged from the hospital, Miss Su, please." Before she finished speaking, Kay, who had been standing in front of her, reached out to the door. Su Jilan clenched her fingers, managed to maintain the last trace of demeanor, and walked out. Kay decisively blocked her view all the way to prevent her from looking into the ward. When the two of them walked away, Nan Heng, who had been leaning against the door of the ward, glanced at Mo Jingshan, whose face was frighteningly pale. "Are you sure you can hold on?" As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Jingshan couldn't answer him at all. With Jin Wan's cry of surprise, the man in front of her leaned toward her. She rushed to hold him. Jin Wan was startled. She immediately tightened her grip on him, afraid that he would fall. Nan Heng frowned and turned to call the nurse. When the doctor and nurse came over and hurriedly helped Mo Jingshan up, Jin Wan looked at the blood on her hand and then at the blood oozing from the back of Mo Jingshan's light blue hospital gown. Her heart skipped a beat. His ward was 4 floors away from hers. Su Jilan hadn't been here for long, and he had suddenly come. How on earth did he get the news, pull out the needles, and come here? His injury wasn't just a simple flesh wound. He had heard from the doctor that the sharp part of the gun but didn't hurt his bones, but the wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. It wasn't easy for him to recuperate for 2 or 3 days. When it was almost healed, he got out of bed again. It was getting dark. "Jin Wan, you're really a jinx." Outside the ward, Nan Heng looked at the woman standing in front of the door with a sigh. "Jin Wan." After Mo Jingshan was brought back to the ward by the medical staff, the wound was retreated, the bleeding was stopped, and the medicine was applied. As she said, Mo Jingshan's wound was sore and the inflammation had not subsided. A few hours later, Mo Jingshan began to have a high fever, and his temperature soared to 40 degrees. If he hadn't been in the hospital, he might really have been burnt out if the fever had been delayed any longer. The medical staff was still in the ward, so Jin Wan couldn't go in now. She could only stand outside and accept the baptism of Nan Heng's eyes. "I've been watching him every moment of the day and told him not to move, but when I went back to the ward to take a shower, you all forgot to keep an eye on him." Kay didn't dare to stop him, and the others didn't know to stop him either. Didn't they know that the wound on his back would have a problem if he came out like this? So what if I stopped him? It's your own man who was scared today. How can you blame it on me? Jin Wan glared at him. "I've just been bombarded by my ex-girlfriend and stimulated physically and mentally, and faced with my husband's high fever and coma. Can't you take my mood into consideration and comfort me a little?" Nan Heng rolled his eyes at her. "I don't see how you've been stimulated by your ex-girlfriend." Jin Wan also glared at him. "I haven't had time to be stimulated, but the person you failed to stop has rushed into the ward. You want to be stimulated, don't you?" Nan Heng raised his cold eyebrows. "If you're willing to listen, I don't mind telling you how Mo Jingxian and Su Jilan got together. No matter how sincere and how insincere they were, Miss Su is right. They've been together for 2 years, and it's not impossible for them to forget each other. It's not impossible for them to fall in love with each other over time. I don't want to listen. Jin Wan looked resolute. Didn't you just say you want to be stimulated? I find that since Mo Jingxian and I got together, you've been particularly against us. I'm not interested in Su Jilan's past, but I'm very interested in you now. Why are you interested in me? You act as if you'll die if you don't say something to me every day. I always feel as if I've robbed your man. Nan Heng, do you have feelings for Mo Jingxian? Jin Wan looked at him meaningfully, and when Nan Heng choked on the cigarette and coughed several times, she glanced at Feng Ling, who had just come out of the elevator. Nan Heng was coughing hard. Feng Ling came over, took a strange look at him, and then looked at Jin Wan flatly. Mrs. Mo, I've arranged for other people to guard your ward. No one will disturb you in the future. Jin Wan nodded. In fact, if it had been anyone else, they wouldn't have been able to get in. After all, Su Jilan had been friends with them before, so it was understandable that they didn't dare to block her blatantly. Chapter 334. Understanding the meaning behind Jin Wan's words, Feng Ling said, We'll investigate those people. Right now, they've already been replaced. Don't worry. Not long after, the doctor came out of the ward. He said that Mo Jingxian had been given an injection to reduce his fever, but his fever was still obvious. His body temperature was only under 39 degrees, and he was still running a high fever. In the next few hours, before his fever completely subsided, someone would have to stay up all night to take care of him and lower his body temperature. They would also have to feed him warm water frequently. With Jin Wan here, naturally, no one would snatch this task from her. In the dead of the night, Nan Heng returned to the base. Feng Ling rested on the long bench outside the ward. The room was quiet. Mo Jingxian was still sleeping. His complexion was different from when he was running a high fever. Right now, his body temperature had dropped slightly. The man's usually handsome face was pale. He was sleeping too quietly. Jin Wan felt even more anxious in her heart. She did not know when his injuries would completely recover. She reached out to touch his forehead. It was indeed still very hot. Jin Wan stood up to bring in the new ice pack that the nurse had just brought in. After holding it in her hand for a while, she carefully placed it on his head. Although Mo Jingxian was unconscious, he did not seem to be sleeping well. Due to the coldness on his head, he unconsciously furrowed his brows. Jin Wan gently placed her hand on his shoulder, patting him gently as she said, You're running a fever. Sleep well. Right now, you don't have to worry about anything. You just need to sleep well and bring your fever down as soon as possible. She was not sure if her words were effective or if Mo Jingxian was not too awake, but not long after she spoke, the man's breathing returned to normal. He had already fallen into a deep sleep. Such an obedient Mo Jingxian, if not for his worrying pale complexion, Jin Wan would have found him slightly adorable. His appearance when he was asleep was completely different from when he was awake. In this world, it was likely that not many people would have the opportunity to see such a fragile, quiet, and defenseless Mo Jingxian. Jin Wan pulled a chair over and sat by the bed. From time to time, she touched his head and hands and occasionally used the electronic thermometer to measure his temperature. For 2 consecutive hours, she tried to find a way to feed him warm water and wipe his palms and neck with a towel dipped in warm water. 2 hours later, Mo Jingxian's body temperature finally dropped to around 37 degrees. After confirming that his fever was gone, Jin Wan carefully removed the ice pack from his head and gently wiped his face. She then sat by the bed and watched him sleep under the faint light of the ward. The man's face was still pale. He just lay quietly on the bed. The bruise on his brow bone a few days ago had disappeared. His clean appearance had an inexplicable kind of sickly beauty. She recalled how this man had stood in her hospital room during the day and treated Su Jilan with no emotion. He was so cold that he seemed to be able to isolate himself from all other women except for her. Jean Wan supported her chin with one hand and leaned against the edge of the bed. She watched the man's sleeping face and gently held his hand. She slowly and gently intertwined her fingers with his, palm against palm. Jean Wan did not know how she had fallen asleep. When she suddenly woke up, she felt that her head was slightly heavy. She abruptly raised her eyes and met the man's ink-black eyes. "When did you wake up?" Feeling that his hand had unknowingly touched her head, Jean Wan rushed to sit up straight and raised her hand to gently pull it down. She felt the temperature of his hand and confirmed that his fever was no longer rising. Only then did she relax. "I actually fell asleep. Wait a moment. I'll go call the doctor." "There's no need to call the doctor. Your fever has already subsided. What's the point of calling them?" Mo Jingshan held her hand and did not let her go. "You had a high fever last night and only went down after midnight. Let the doctor come and check. It's just an infection. I'll just take a few more days of anti-inflammatory medicine and injections. There's no need to make such a big fuss." The man's voice was lower than a few days ago, but each word was clear. "You took care of me for an entire night. Have you forgotten that you're pregnant? There are senior nurses in the hospital, but if they're here, it won't be convenient for me to come in to see you. Besides, your fever was too serious last night. If I'm not here, I won't be able to sleep. I might as well stay here to watch over you." Jean Wan smiled and habitually touched his forehead. "Then I'll call Feng Ling to buy some food." Feeling his body temperature, Jean Wan sat by the bed with a sigh of relief and rubbed her face against his palm. She said with dim eyes, "Don't do this again in the future. I'm afraid that the wound will become infected, and you pulled out the anti-inflammatory needle. In fact, whether it's Miss Su or anyone else, it doesn't matter. Even if you want to protect me, you have to see if your body can take it. I'm not a little white flower that can be easily bullied. As long as I'm firm enough, no one can do anything to me. But you, now that you're injured like this, if we stand outside and are blown by the wind, the first one to fall will definitely be you. No matter how powerful you are, you have to know your limits now, okay? You speak as if I'm already so old that I can't get out of bed with a little injury. I'm not that fragile." The man chuckled lightly. "TSK, then get out of bed if you have the ability. If you have the ability, don't let the wound get infected." An inflamed high fever is more serious than a normal cold. It's really scary to have a fever of 40 degrees Celsius and be unconscious. Jean Wan picked up a hospital note by the side. On it was written the temperature she had recorded when she helped him take his temperature several times last night. "Look at it yourself. If I had a fever like this, wouldn't you be angry at me for not taking care of my body?" Mo Jingshan glanced at it and did not argue with her. He gently patted her hand, asking mildly, "Where's Nan Heng?" "He returned to the base last night. I don't know if he has come to the hospital yet. Are you looking for him?" Jean Wan placed the note back and turned to pour him a cup of warm water. "And you took care of me here for an entire night last night. Rest well today. Call Nan Heng for me." "All right, I'll call him in a bit. Lie down and don't move." Jean Wan brought the cup over and fed him a few mouthfuls of water with a spoon. Mo Jingshan felt somewhat helpless because of her careful feeding him water. Right now, Jean Wan was quite obsessed with feeding him. Chapter 335. After calling Nan Heng, Jean Wan turned to see that Feng Ling had gotten up from the lounge chair in the corridor and was walking over. "You didn't sleep all night?" Jean Wan asked. Feng Ling didn't answer but glanced into the ward. "How is it? Is Mr. Mo awake?" "He's awake. He must have something to talk to Nan Heng alone. I just called Nan Heng. He'll be here soon." Jean Wan glanced at Feng Ling. "You weren't in the hospital yesterday afternoon. Where did you go?" Feng Ling paused and said lightly, "I dealt with some personal matters." Jean Wan glanced at her again. Even though she could see that Feng Ling had something on her mind, she didn't ask more and just asked her to help buy some food. Jean Wan took care of Mo Jingshan all night and didn't sleep well. Her face was haggard that she didn't notice. Feng Ling was now in charge of Jean Wan's daily needs and knew some of her habits like the back of her hand. Seeing that Jean Wan didn't intend to sleep after returning to the ward and didn't look very good, she went out to buy some food and came back with other things on her way back. "Mrs. Mo, do you want a mask?" When Feng Ling pushed the door open, Jean Wan was lying on the bed with her eyes closed, trying to sleep. But she really couldn't sleep. As soon as she closed her eyes, she saw the way Su Jilan looked at Mo Jingshan yesterday. How much did she love him that she would throw away all her self-esteem and pride to try to hold on to even the slightest bit of affection for him? To be honest, Jean Wan didn't like that particularly persistent look in her eyes. In the end, Feng Ling's words successfully caused Jean Wan to open her eyes. She sat up on the bed, only to see Feng Ling holding a bag in her hand and placing several different brands of facial masks on her bed. "Why did you buy these things?" Jean Wan was surprised. She couldn't imagine Feng Ling standing in front of the skincare counter. "I saw that you don't look well. I heard that women often have to use masks when their skin is not in good condition. I haven't used this kind of thing before and didn't know which brand was better. Just now, I passed by the mall and bought a few." Hearing her words, Jean Wan picked up 2 of the masks and looked at them. The corner of her mouth twitched. It was obvious that Feng Ling had never used any skincare products before. She had never used any facial masks either. In addition to whitening and moisturizing products, there were even products to tighten and remove wrinkles. The 2 of them were only in their early 20s, and their faces were full of collagen. They were very young, so how could they use these things? "You haven't used it before?" Jean Wan suddenly smiled and looked up at her. Feng Ling met her bright eyes and instantly understood what she meant. She took a step back and said, "Mrs. Mo, these are all for you. But I don't need that much." Jean Wan picked up 2 of the simplest moisturizing masks and waved to her. "Come here, don't hide so far away. Anyway, Nan Heng is now in Mo Jingshan's ward, and the 2 of us can't go in. Instead of waiting here, we might as well do the masks together. You've bought them anyway." Jean Wan didn't usually use these things, but she knew better than Feng Ling. Seeing Feng Ling's determined expression, she narrowed her eyes and smiled. "You really don't want to try them? You've been in the base for so many years. Although your skin is good, it's still a little rough. Since you've bought so many masks, why don't you try them with me?" "I'd better forget it. I don't know how to use these things, and why do I need such good skin?" Feng Ling continued to take a step back. Jean Wan raised her eyebrows. "You really don't think of yourself as a woman?" Feng Ling hesitated, looked at the things in Jean Wan's hands, and asked after a long while, "Do I really not look like a woman?" Jean Wan rested her chin on one hand and sat on the bed. She looked at Feng Ling, who had been troubled recently and seemed to be a little self-doubtful. "Your hair looked good when it was longer, but who knows what happened to you? You cut it so short. I think even Kay's hair is longer than yours." Feng Ling obviously had no idea whether the length of hair was good or not. "I'm not used to long hair. It's more comfortable to have short hair." "Then when you look in the mirror and see your short hair, do you think you look like a woman?" Jean Wan raised her eyebrows. "I rarely look in the mirror." In the end, Feng Ling couldn't persuade Jean Wan and was dragged into the bathroom by Jean Wan. The 2 women washed their faces in front of the mirror, rubbed foam on their faces, and put the masks on their faces. At first, Feng Ling didn't even know how to put on the masks, and Jean Wan taught her little by little. Unexpectedly, this woman, who could shoot the whole world with a gun, was defeated by a mask. Finally, after Feng Ling tore up 3 masks, Jean Wan successfully got her to stick a complete mask on her face. No one who passed by this ward could imagine what these 2 women were doing in the middle of their busy lives. Kay came over to knock on the door, and Jean Wan answered. Feng Ling had just come out of the bathroom and didn't realize that someone was coming in, so when the door was pushed open from the outside, Feng Ling's footsteps paused. Kay did come to find Feng Ling, but as soon as he came in, he saw the 2 women with masks on their faces. There were several holes in the white masks, and the 2 women stared in his direction at the same time with their eyes almost the same size. Jean Wan was fine, but when Feng Ling saw Kay's shocked expression, she immediately took off the mask on her face with a cold face. Kay, however, suddenly raised his mobile phone and took a photo of Feng Ling. Feng Ling paused in her action of taking off the mask. Why did you take a photo of me? Damn it, I can see Feng Ling wearing a mask in my lifetime. I must show this photo to boss. After saying that, Kay forgot the purpose of his visit. Just as Feng Ling was about to grab him, he opened the door and slipped away as if there was oil on the soles of his feet. Kay, delete the photo for me. Feng Ling suddenly chased after him. Jean Wan was speechless as she watched the two of them dash out like the wind. First of all, Kay was as good as Feng Ling, and she didn't know whether Feng Ling could catch up with him. After all, Kay was tall and had long legs, but Feng Ling ran out with a mask on her face. Was she planning to let the whole hospital see her? Chapter 336. Give me your cell phone. Feng Ling glared at him fiercely. Kay pursed his lips and pointed at Feng Ling's face with his chin. You just came here like this. It doesn't matter if I delete the photo or not. Feng Ling froze and realized that she just came out like this. She turned her eyes abruptly and met Nan Heng's eyes. What the hell are you doing? Nan Heng gave her a strange look. Feng Ling. Nan Heng reached out and peeled off the mask paper on Feng Ling's face. Seeing her face was covered with water, he raised his eyebrows and touched her chin with his fingers, only to touch a handful of wet and sticky essence. He immediately shook his hand in disgust. What the hell is this? Wet and sticky? Jean Wan had just washed her face and came over when she heard Nan Heng's ridicule from a distance. Feng Ling was about to raise her sleeve to wipe her face, when Jean Wan had come up to her and handed her the wet towel she had just brought. She then glanced at Kay, who was watching the fun, and Nan Heng, who was wiping his hand on Kay's clothes. Sure enough, you can't blame our Feng Ling for not being feminine. She stays with you guys every day. It's strange that she can be feminine. Feng Ling had wiped her face clean, but because she wiped too hard, the skin on her cheeks was a little red. Nan Heng glanced at Jean Wan and then at Feng Ling. He saw the red patch on her snow-white face, which looked much better than usual, and then at Feng Ling's collar, which was pulled down a lot when she washed her face. Looking at her white skin under the collar, he didn't speak. You two women stayed here all night last night and didn't rest in the ward today. You're really energetic. Nan Heng moved his eyes away from Feng Ling's face and said coldly. Every time Jean Wan bumped into Nan Heng, they would argue with each other. Right now, seeing that Feng Ling was clearly unhappy, she did not say much. She threw Nan Heng a good luck expression and glanced at the door of the ward. Are you done talking? Has he fallen asleep again? I haven't slept yet. I just received a call from the MO Corporation in High City, and the call hasn't ended yet. Nan Heng said and joked, Are you going to stay in this ward and not leave? Do you need to ask the doctor to move your bed to this room so that you can stay here with him? That way, you won't have to squeeze into the same bed. Jean Wan knew he was teasing her, but she didn't reject him. She smiled. It seems like a good idea. Nan Heng sneered. In your dreams. Mrs. M.O., I'm going to wash my face, Feng Ling suddenly said coldly and turned to leave. Jean Wan turned to follow her. Seeing Feng Ling's cold face, she was about to comfort her. After all, Kay was just joking, and Nan Heng was obviously ridiculing her. She couldn't let Feng Ling suffer such a blow just because she rarely took a step in the direction of a woman. Before she could finish her sentence, the elevator door suddenly opened as soon as they reached the elevator. As soon as she met the eyes of the two people inside, Jean Wan paused. The two people inside also fixed their eyes on her when they saw her. Dad. Jean Wan hesitated and politely addressed him with this word. Mo Shaoza looked at her coldly. Jingxin is hospitalized here. You really hit it well. Didn't you even inform us? Jean Wan moved her eyes from Shuyan behind him and looked at Mo Shaoza, saying, I'm sorry. We came back in a hurry and haven't left the hospital these days. It's my negligence not to inform you in time, but I really don't have your contact information. Ever since the bet with the Mo family that was worth tens of millions a week, Mo Shaoza didn't have much reason to pick on her. After living in harmony for so long, she put away her sharp-tongued side. The first thing she said was to directly and sincerely apologize. This also helped Mo Shaoza, who came with anger, to calm down a little. Mo Shaoza came out, took a look at Jean Wan, and then at Feng Ling, who didn't plan to go back to wash her face and just stood by Jin Wan's side. He looked at the two of them and finally fell on Jin Wan's face. How is Jingshen's injury? Jin Wan wasn't sure if he knew about Mo Jingshen's experience, but since Father Mo had been in the United States for so many years, he must know what his son had done under his nose. She thought about it and didn't say too much but just said, "It's not light, but it's much better now. The operation was done 4 days ago. He just needs to rest in the hospital for a while." Getting a reassuring answer, Mo Xiaozi nodded and turned to look at Shu Yan, who was standing silently behind him. "Shu Yan, go see Jingshen. If he needs anything, ask him to tell us. He's been injured for so many days, but he didn't inform us. He really doesn't take us, his parents, seriously at all." Jin Wan turned to see Shu Yan walking directly to the ward and twitched her lips. Before she spoke, Mo Xiaozi said coldly, "After Jingshen is discharged from the hospital, remember to let him stay in the United States for a while. High City only has grandfather Mo and the Mo family's old house. It's really meaningless for him to stay in High City. For him, his real home is still in Los Angeles. He hasn't been home for several years. Even if he doesn't plan to take over Shine Group, he should go back to see his mother." "Aren't you going to tell him in person about going home?" Jin Wan asked. Mo Xiaozi's face was cold. He wanted to say it in person. Although he didn't want to admit it, it was clear that Jin Wan's words were more effective than his. On the other side, outside Mo Jingshen's ward, Shu Yan was carrying some nutrition products and a fruit basket. As soon as she walked over, she was blocked by Nan Heng with a cigarette in his mouth. Nan Heng didn't light the cigarette in his mouth. He narrowed his eyes coldly and glanced at her. "Missin, are you here to visit on behalf of Chairman Mo?" Shu Yan nodded politely to him. "Yes, Chairman Mo asked me to see Jingshen." Nan Heng smiled insincerely, but his smile was obviously cold. His tall figure still blocked the door of the ward, and he said coldly, "He is resting. It's really inconvenient for Missin to go in like this. If you need any condolences or instructions, just say it to Mrs. Mo, and she will help you convey them." Jin Wan stood on the side of the elevator and heard Nan Heng's words. She silently gave Nan Heng a thumbs up in her heart. Usually, Nan Heng could say whatever he liked to her, but when it was time for him to take action, he was really reliable. Although Mo Xiaozi had taken Shu Yan back to the United States, he brought her here today and now asked Shu Yan to visit Mo Jingshen. Obviously, he was still a little tempted and hadn't completely given up. Besides, this was the United States, Shine's territory, so he was even more brazen. Chapter 337. Mr. Nan Heng, Director Mo is right there. You should have heard what he said earlier, Shu Yan emphasized. Nan Heng removed the cigarette from his mouth, coldly narrowing his eyes. "I've been friends with Mo Jingshen for many years, but I have nothing to do with Shine Group. Director Mo should know my temper. I'm afraid unrelated people won't be able to enter my place." As he spoke, Nan Heng coldly glanced in Mo Xiaozi's direction with a faint smile. When Mo Xiaozi heard these words, his expression was clearly unhappy. "My own son is hospitalized here. As his father, do I have to be stopped by you when I want to visit? If Director Mo wishes to enter, of course, I won't stop you." Nan Heng's tone was unhurried and indifferent. "But I'm afraid it's inappropriate for Missin to enter. Mrs. Mo is still here watching. To let Missin in, Director Mo? Are you sure you're not joking?" Mo Xiaozi coldly furrowed his brows. Shu Yan walked away from the door and turned back. She looked at Jin Wan and handed the things in her hands to her. "Mrs. Mo, sorry for the trouble." Jin Wan's lips curved up slightly. She received it. "I thank Secretary and on Jingshen's behalf." Speaking up to here, Jin Wan paused for a moment before saying, "I'll continue to call you Secretarian, right? Right now, you're the secretarial manager of Shine Group. Compared to when you were in the Mo Corporation, your position is much higher. To be able to walk so smoothly in the workplace, it can be seen that Secretary N's work ability is indeed recognized." Shu Yan politely nodded at her. The smile in her eyes was neither heavy nor faint. You can call me by my name or secretary, and Jinwan exchanged a look with her. A woman's intuition had always been accurate. She thoughtfully watched An Shuyen for a few seconds before handing the things in her hands to Feng Ling, who had already reached out. Dad, are you going in to see Jingshin now? Jinwan asked. Although it was not Mo Xiaozi who was shut out earlier, Nanheng clearly did not give him any face by shutting An Shuyen out. Mo Xiaozi's expression was cold as he glanced in the direction of the ward. After a moment of silence, he said, "Since Jingshin is still resting, I won't go in. In another half a month it will be the Chinese New Year. If he can be discharged by then, he can go home for a reunion dinner." Jinwan nodded. "All right, I'll tell him." Mo Xiaozi took another look at her and was about to leave with a sullen face when he suddenly paused and turned to look at An Shuyen beside him. "Help her when you are not busy in the hospital. Jinwan is not familiar with Los Angeles. She may need your help." "All right," An Shuyen said softly. Mo Xiaozi sighed from an angle that Jinwan couldn't see and entered the elevator. After they left, Jinwan looked at the door of the elevator and stared at the number that dropped from the top floor to the bottom floor. No matter what, Mo Xiaozi was Mo Jingshin's biological father. Even if An Shuyen could not enter, he could enter if he wanted to. However, Mo Xiaozi clearly had a temper. Or perhaps his desire to control others was too strong. Anything that was out of his control could anger him. He came in a hurry and left in a hurry. There was not the slightest bit of father-son affection between them. If Mo Jingshin could be discharged in another half a month, was there really a need to go back? And just now, for a moment, Jinwan felt An Shuyen was no longer as proactive as when she first went to High City and the Mo Corporation. On the contrary, although An Shuyen did not explicitly say or do anything, she gave people the feeling that she was just accepting Mo Xiaozi's arrangements and did not take the initiative or resist. "Mrs. Mo, should I send these in?" Feng Ling checked the fruit basket and nutrition products she had just received and asked after making sure there were no problems. Jinwan's gaze moved away from the number 1 on the elevator and glanced at the things in the fruit basket. She could tell at a glance that these things were not bought by Mo Xiaozi. Given Mo Xiaozi's character, he probably wouldn't buy anything when he came to visit his son. The fruit was very exquisite. It was not the kind of fruit that could be bought casually in the supermarket near the hospital. It was a fruit that was usually very rare and had high nutritional content. Even the nutritional products were mostly good things that could enrich the blood. It could be seen that An Shuyen had done her homework before coming. This An Shuyen should have been very sober when she left High City, right? Then why had she acted as if everything had been arranged by Mo Xiaozi? Why had she acted as if she was innocent? In the following week, it was clear that many people who thought they could make a profit here were mercilessly shut out. Thus, this week, the hospital was especially quiet. No one dared to rashly come and disturb them. The last time Mo Jingshin's wound was inflamed, he only had a fever for one night. After that, his recovery was not bad. A week later, the skin on the surface of his wound had begun to heal, and he could occasionally get off the bed and walk normally. "The last time Dad asked you to go back for dinner after being discharged next week, do you have any plans?" Jinwan supported him as they walked around the ward. When they came to the window, she turned to open the curtains and then closed the window that had been slightly open earlier. "I don't have any plans. Akib's matter has been settled. Officer Entz and the people from the base will take care of everything on their own. I don't plan to stay in America for too long. After I recover, I'll bring you back to High City as soon as possible." Mo Jingshin looked at Jinwan's meticulous manner and smiled. Next week is the Spring Festival in China. No matter where in the country, it's basically the Spring Festival holiday state. The Mo Corporation doesn't have too much work for you to handle personally. It's actually quite good to accompany your parents for a reunion dinner, but you accompany grandfather every year. If you don't go back to accompany him this year, won't grandfather be angry? The moment Elder Mo was mentioned, Jinwan couldn't help smiling. The winter sun shone in through the window, landing on Mo Jingshin's elegant and deep brows. It was as though the man who was smiling warmly was surrounded by a circle of light. He said mildly, "He won't be angry. Although we aren't in the Mo residence, there are many relatives who come and go. It's not like you don't know how many people visit every day. Dealing with those relatives is enough to keep him busy. As he spoke, Jean-Wan reached out to his back and gently scratched it through the hospital gown. She then asked with bright eyes, "Shouldn't the healing period be very itchy? Don't you feel even the slightest itch?" Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. "It wasn't itchy at first, but after you scratched it, it did feel a little." At the same time, he bent down slightly to look at her fair and clean face. His gaze met hers, and he said meaningfully, "What's more itchy is my heart." Jean-Wan. Chapter 338. Ever since she became pregnant, Mo Jingshan had changed from teasing her physically to teasing her verbally. Jean-Wan was already used to it. Mo Jingshan could only lie on the bed, and she would glare at him even if he moved his arm. Now that he could finally walk and hold her, the man's arms around her waist gradually tightened, as though he was going to imprison her in his arms and never let her go. Both of them were wearing hospital gowns. Because Jean-Wan was too thin, her clothes appeared particularly loose. The man only gently tugged at them, and the 2 buttons on her chest were directly undone. Being held in the man's arms like this couldn't be more convenient. Jean-Wan tilted her head. "I'm less than 2 months pregnant." He replied vaguely, "And I know. A few days ago, when I went for a checkup, the doctor said that it was too early to see clearly. I'll go for a checkup when I have time in the next few days." I didn't know that a prenatal checkup would be so troublesome. The man's kiss spread to her collarbone and then moved back to her neck and finally fell on her lips. He pressed her against the wall by the window. Although he held her tightly, he avoided her stomach and pried open her lips and teeth to invade. They kissed for a long time. Jean-Wan didn't struggle. Anyway, Mo Jingshan knew better than her. Sure enough, as they kissed, they forgot about each other. When they were ready, the man pressed against her, and the 2 of them stood against the wall. He leaned against her neck, panting, and his husky voice was almost against her ear. "There's still 1.5 months to go. It's uncomfortable." Jean-Wan wanted to laugh. She held it in for a long time and finally laughed. She raised her hand to hug the man who seemed to be acting coquettishly. Anyway, she defined Mo Jingshan's words of uncomfortable as acting coquettishly. She smiled and held his neck. "Grandpa, didn't you want us to have a football team? You have to bear with it sooner or later. After you give birth to one, who knows when you'll have to give birth to a second one? You'll get used to it." The man suddenly pinched her chin and kissed her again. Then he kissed her cheek and moved to her ear to coax her. "One is enough. Do you think I don't know that you go back to your ward every morning to secretly vomit behind my back? Just one is already so difficult to endure. How can I bear to let you suffer this kind of suffering again?" Jean-Wan found that Mo Jingshan's appearance really gave people the impression that he was a man of few desires. However, when she really got to know him better, she realized that this man always had the ability to make people drown in his kisses. If she wasn't pregnant now, when he could finally move, he would probably kiss her and throw her onto the bed at any time. When she went for another prenatal checkup, the results this time were not very different from the previous one. It still looked good, but compared with ordinary pregnant women, the fetus was not very stable. This had something to do with Jean-Wan's cold womb and her experience in the past 20 days and her poor sleep every day. She slept well in Mo Jingshan's ward, but every day she was always worried about his wound, and she was always in a bad mood. Occasionally, she would have nightmares in which Dolly pointed a gun at her. Due to all these factors, the little thing in her stomach was not very stable. It was slightly smaller than normal. The doctor reminded Jean-Wan to eat more, get more nutrition, rest more, and stay calm. She did not need to worry too much. So in the last few days of Mo Jingshan's stay in the hospital, Jean-Wan didn't sleep in his ward under the doctor's advice but obediently recuperated in her own ward. This time, Mo Jingshan could walk around at will, but she could only lie in bed and watch this man's ambiguous expression when he came to visit him from time to time. Was really, the tables had turned. There were so many Chinese in Los Angeles that the Spring Festival in China could be felt in the major shopping malls and streets here. On the day before New Year's Eve, Mo Jingshan could finally be discharged from the hospital. When he walked out of the hospital, Shine Group's car was already waiting outside. In other words, Mo Xiaozi didn't intend to give them any room to choose. Since they had returned to Los Angeles, they naturally had to listen to his arrangements. A middle-aged driver came out of the car and nodded respectfully to Mo Jingshan. "So Mo, long time no see. Are you feeling better? Chairman Mo asked us to pick you up." The driver was a Chinese man in his 40s named George. He had been a butler and driver for the Mo family in Los Angeles for many years and was very familiar with Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan glanced at him indifferently. "Did I say I would go back today?" George paused and explained, "But tomorrow is the Spring Festival in China. Chairman Mo learned that you were discharged today, so he specially sent us to pick you up, and Nan Heng was not here today. Feng Ling, Kay, and the others were going to send them to Mo Jingshan's residence in Los Angeles, but now the Mo family came to pick them up. They didn't say anything and were about to move Jin Wan and Mo Jingshan's things to the car. Mo Jingshan said, 'Put them down.' Feng Ling and Kay paused, took down the luggage that was about to be put in the car, and turned to look at Mo Jingshan, waiting for his instructions. 'Put them in our car.' Mo Jingshan was expressionless and took a look at George. 'If there's time, I'll go back tomorrow. You can go.' George had been in the Mo family for many years and certainly knew the relationship between Mo Jingshan and the Mo family. He didn't say anything, nodded, and returned to the car. After waiting for a moment, seeing that Mo Jingshan really didn't want to get in the car, he had to drive back to Shine Group. There were 2 cars parked in front of the hospital. The black Bentley appeared on the busy street of Los Angeles at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, followed by a car belonging to Feng Ling and the others. It wasn't until 6 o'clock that they arrived at 11 Base. The winter day was too short and the sky was already dark. Jin Wan didn't expect that she could visit the base as soon as she was discharged from the hospital. When Mo Jingshan arrived, Nan Heng was talking with someone inside. When he came out, he didn't look as casual as usual. He took a solemn look at Jin Wan and Feng Ling and then went in with Mo Jingshan to have a private chat. This was a very private place in 11 Base. Jin Wan didn't go in but let Feng Ling and Kay take her to other places. After visiting the shooting range and some close combat training areas, Jin Wan looked at the few young men who were still training in such cold weather and turned to look at Feng Ling, who was always dressed in black. "Did you used to be like this every day?" Chapter 339. Mrs. Mo, don't be fooled by Feng Ling's thin body. Every time we train, she is better than us, and when we fight, she is always the first one. In terms of close combat, 80% of the people in our base can't beat her, and the remaining 20% can only beat her if they have a chance. She is very fierce. Kay said as he put his hand on Feng Ling's shoulder boldly as if he were getting along with a brother. Feng Ling didn't avoid him but said coldly, "I refuse to be flattered." Kay smiled. "What's wrong? Are you afraid that Mrs. Mo will raise your salary when she finds out your status in our base?" "Alas, it's not that Mrs. Mo can't afford it. Get lost." Feng Ling raised her hand and slapped him away. "I'll walk here with her for a while. Why are you always following her? I don't think you can have a private conversation with Mrs. Mo. Last time, you were so embarrassed that you almost smashed my cell phone." Before Kay finished speaking, before Feng Ling raised her foot to kick him, he nimbly dodged and ran away. Jin Wan stood on the side of the training ground with a smile, glanced at Kay's back as he ran away, and then turned to look at the people who were training inside. She touched the metal railing next to her with both hands, and the cold touch made her feel that everything was real. Just like in Cambodia, in such a heavy training base, it seemed that everyone had a gun on their waist, and from time to time, she could hear the rhythmic sound of gunfire coming from the shooting range. "You can't enter this kind of place easily, can you?" Jin Wan asked. Feng Ling stood next to her, looking in the same direction as her, and answered lightly, "N." Jin Wan turned to look at her. "Then how did you get in?" "I happened to save a person from their base and was introduced by him, but I was too small when I was a teenager. I was a woman, but I had to pretend to be a man, so I looked even thinner and smaller in a group of newcomers. At that time, Nan Heng was very averse to me and didn't think highly of me. He tried many ways to force me to leave, forcing me to undergo the most intense training and tests. It almost cost me half my life, but I still refused to leave. Maybe I do have talent and explosive power in this aspect. I'm small, but I'm strong, and I can bear hardships. Later, I changed from the little thing he didn't think highly of to the person he occasionally had to get up in the middle of the night to train with me. Jin-won leaned against the metal railing and looked at her. Nanheng's nature should be very cold and difficult to get along with. It's hard for him to change his opinion of someone he doesn't think highly of. Just like before, I felt that he didn't like me. If it weren't for Mo Jingshan, he might not even have bothered to say a few words to me. It's really not easy for you to change his opinion of such a stubborn man. He's that kind of person. He's ruthless, but you have to be more ruthless than him. Feng Ling raised her chin and pointed to several people who were training in close combat. When I was 17, my body was basically developed. At that time, the clothes I wore were especially loose. When I was training with them, I was afraid that they would find out my true gender, so there was a period of time when I didn't dare to move. Nanheng fought with me several times and found that I had strangely become timid, so he directly beat me to the ground. At that time, the weather was especially cold. He told me to lie here for an hour and not to get up. If I dared to get up, he would kick me once. So ruthless. I didn't get up at that time. I lay there for the whole night, thinking of all kinds of ways to hide my chest and figure, and in the end, I fainted from the cold. And then? There was no then. When I woke up, Kay and the others sent me to the infirmary. I woke up quickly and opened my eyes as soon as I reached the infirmary. Afraid that they would find out that my body was different, I pushed them away and ran back to my room alone. I took a hot shower, but I still caught a cold. I had a high fever for 2 days and slept alone for 2 days. Then I recovered. Maybe it's because I'm young that I don't care how my body is tortured. From her words, it was clear that she meant that Nanheng did not come to visit her at all. She said it so lightly, but a young girl in her teens already had such a strong endurance. Even now, when she mentioned these things, she did not seem to feel any pain or grievance. Hearing this, Jin-won felt an inexplicable surge of emotions surging in her heart. Feng Ling, can you teach me how to shoot? Why do you suddenly want to learn how to shoot? Last time in Cambodia, I fired that shot. If you hadn't come in time, I probably would have shot myself again. Who knows what will happen in the future? Anyway, I can train here now. Can you teach me? Who said that only men had a hero complex? Women also had it. No one wanted to be the one who held others back when they were in danger. It was always good to have a skill. Feng Ling wanted to say that it was better to teach her some simple self-defense skills than to shoot, but when she was about to speak, she remembered that Jin-won was pregnant and couldn't learn these things that required extreme movements for the time being. Then teach me, but I feel that even if you learn it, you won't be able to use it in the future. Let's talk about whether I can use it or not. The main thing is that you are too handsome. I want to be as handsome as you. In the evening, the training time on the shooting range had just ended, and then there was a gunshot. When an important guest in the base's conference room heard the gunshot, he calmly commented, "This sounds like a newcomer." Nanheng glanced at the time and then exchanged a look with Mo Jingshan, who was sitting on the other side. He then stood up and looked at the situation on the shooting range through the base's surveillance cameras. He saw that Feng Ling and Jin-won were each holding a gun. Feng Ling taught Jin-won how to hold a gun, and Jin-won imitated her. Feng Ling fired a shot and hit the bull. Jin-won also fired a shot. Fortunately, the bullet didn't fly out, but it only hit the third ring. Seeing the accuracy of this woman's shooting, Nanheng recalled the shot that Jin-won had fired in the nick of time in Cambodia. He narrowed his eyes and sneered, turning to say, "Your woman is learning how to shoot from Feng Ling. It seems that the promise you made to Elder Mo to not stain your hands with blood will be taken over by your wife. Is it because she was stimulated last time and wants to learn some skills so that she can fight with us in the future?" Chapter 340. Nanheng raised his brows. Not necessarily. A person's potential is limitless. Previously in Cambodia, It was enough to prove that sometimes, the most unexpected people can become the key to victory. Furthermore, no matter how good Jin Wan's marksmanship was, she clearly wanted to protect her man's heart. Mo Jingshan, who had mostly recovered, revealed a hint of a smile on his lips. Between the two of them, one was here, and the other was slowly learning how to shoot at the shooting range. Even from such a distance, she could still forcefully feed him a mouthful of dog food. Nan Heng's lips twitched. He moved away from the monitor screen to allow Mo Jingshan to continue admiring his wife's back view. The sky gradually darkened. The base was surrounded by bright lights, especially the shooting range. The lights here seemed to be brighter than the other training grounds. Even though the wind was bone-chilling, Jinwan was still in the mood to play. She fired at a target 50 meters away. Reality proved that she really could not hit a target more than 100 meters away. However, within 50 meters, she could basically hit a 5-ring target. Initially, Feng Ling stood by her side to teach her all the movements. Now, it was Jinwan who stood by her side to train her aim. Feng Ling would occasionally speak up to guide her on which positions were not standard. Just like that, she trained for more than half an hour. In the cold wind, Jinwan was covered in sweat. She moved to the side over 10 steps, planning to challenge the target 100 meters away again. Pang! It tilted again. Jinwan pursed her lips. As she loaded the gun, she said, "Feng Ling, your marksmanship is so good. How many years did you practice? Do you need to practice for this 100 meters for a long time? I feel like the wind speed will also affect the direction of the shot." No one behind her answered her. Jinwan raised the gun and continued to aim at the target 100 meters away, planning to shoot again. All of a sudden, she felt a warmth on the back of her hand. Just as she was about to shoot, she paused. Without turning back, she knew it was Mo Jingshan. The man's clean and refreshing scent surrounded her. He didn't say anything and only stood behind her, holding her waist and straightening her posture. He held her fingers with his other hand and said in a low and hoarse voice by her ear, "Try it now." Jinwan felt that her hand did not seem to be much different from before. However, it seemed like a certain angle that she had not been able to control had been corrected. She calmly aimed at the target 100 meters away and forcefully hooked her fingers. Bullseye. Looking at the bullseye that was shot through Jinwan. Back then, in Cambodia, she had repeatedly feared that something would happen to Mo Jingshan. In the end, it turned out that he had never intended to shoot. Jinwan turned back to look at the man behind her. The cold wind blew past. Mo Jingshan opened the black cashmere coat she had bought, held her in his arms, and wrapped her in the coat. At the same time, he took the gun from her hand and threw it to Feng Ling. Feng Ling raised her hand to catch the gun, looked at Jinwan with a smile, and walked away. "You've been standing here practicing for so long. Aren't you cold?" The man's low voice was close to her ear. "It's not cold. It's quite exciting." Jinwan smiled honestly. Because of her poor marksmanship, her smile was a little shy, and a dimple appeared on her lips. She didn't feel cold, but now that she was wrapped in the man's clothes, she turned around in his arms and put her arms around his back. "Aren't you talking to Nan Heng inside? Are you done?" "It's nothing important. I'm meeting an old friend." Mo Jingshan kissed her forehead. "You can just play around with shooting here. There's no need to specially learn. In the future, there won't be any opportunities for you to shoot. I just suddenly feel that Feng Ling is especially handsome. I feel that a woman's handsome side is especially charming, so I wanted to learn from her." The man watched her with his dark, calm eyes and gradually chuckled lowly. "You're already very charming right now. Do you want to be more charming? I'm already restraining myself. Are you planning to make me accompany you in bed every night until the day we die?" Jinwan. The next day, at noon, Mo Jingshan drove the black Bentley directly to the Mo family's manor in Los Angeles. Although this place didn't occupy as much land as the Mo family's old mansion in High City, it was still more than 1,000 meters long. Moreover, in Los Angeles, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, and it was in a prosperous, wealthy area, it could be seen that Shine Group had indeed stood tall in the American Chinese community for many years. After all, It was said that this manor in the wealthy area had been built for many years. Those who could live here were not ordinary people. As soon as she got out of the car, Jin-won found that there were 2 luxury cars parked in the parking lot. She asked in confusion, "Does the Mo family have many relatives in Los Angeles? Is there a relative here today?" Mo Jingshin glanced at it. Then why are there so many cars? Someone must have driven it here. If it's only the Mo family's cars, shouldn't they be parked in the garage? Jin-won glanced inside again. At this time, the housekeeper George, who used to work as a driver, came out to welcome them. "So Mo, Mrs. Mo, welcome back. It's just the right time. Dinner is about to start." Mo Jingshin nodded lightly and did not say much. Jin-won called him Uncle George. As she was about to walk in, Jin-won was suddenly held by the man's hand. She was forced to stop and turn to look at Mo Jingshin. She was about to ask him what he was doing, but because of his gaze, she subconsciously turned her head to look inside. Mo Jingshin looked ahead, coldly watching Su Jilan, who had just walked out of the door of the villa, and the man's aura instantly reached a new height. A few days ago, Mo Jingshin was sickly, pale, and weak, but now he was as cold and grim, exuding a silent and chilling aura of alienation. Jin-won had thought of countless possibilities. She had thought that the person she would meet here was An Shuyen. After all, Mo Xiaozi intended to play matchmaker with his most capable secretary, but she never expected that it would be Su Jilan. Since Su Jilan was here, Kimwon glanced at the villa. Then the Su family should be here too. No wonder there were so many cars in the parking lot. She turned to see a gray-haired old man through the window of the villa. In the Mo family, except for grandfather Mo, there was no other old man of this age, so she guessed that this should be the legendary Elder Su. Did he hear that they would come back for the reunion dinner after failing to enter the hospital to see Mo Jingshin, so he came to the Mo family to wait? Jin-won's good mood suddenly exploded. Chapter 341. Mo Jingshin's expression was cold and handsome. He held Jin-won's hand and turned to leave, not intending to stay a moment longer. Jin-won had just been pulled a few steps when Mo Xiaozi's cold voice rang. "You just came back and you're leaving?" Mo Xiaozi didn't expect that Mo Jingshin would pull Jin-won away without any reaction. Jin-won paused because of Mo Xiaozi's voice. After all, as a daughter-in-law, it was not good for her to be too arrogant. Mo Jingshin didn't let go of her hand. He brought her to his side, put his palm on her back, and forcibly led her out of the Mo family's simple black European-style door. He said calmly and coldly, "Ignore them. Let's go." With that, he strode out with Jin-won. At this time, Elder Su heard the noise and had already come out. He looked at the door. Although he was old, his eyes were bright and full of spirit. The reason she came here today was indeed because of Mo Jingshin. Before coming here, he had doubted whether Mo Jingshin would come back, but today was the Spring Festival in China, and he was in Los Angeles. He couldn't just pass by his house 3 times without entering, so he came here to take a gamble. But Mo Jingshin's attitude said it all. At this moment, Su Jilan stood there, watching the 2 of them who were almost far away. She might have thought it was not difficult at first, but after facing the ruthless and unconquerable Mo Jingshin in the hospital, and seeing the 2 of them who didn't even look back, she suddenly felt that everything was too unreal. Jin-won was wearing a white cashmere coat, which made a couple with Mo Jingshin's black coat. From their backs, the man was tall and straight, and the woman's slender figure was perfect. Standing together, they were indeed a perfect match. Jin-won's long, curly, fluffy hair fell from her shoulders and scattered on her back. The ends of her hair were covered by the man's palm when he pressed against her back. They stood so intimately and dazzlingly. Su Jilan hid the reluctance and depression in her eyes. She looked up and saw that Jin-won seemed to be thinking about something and hesitated, but the man firmly pulled her away. "Jingshin," Mo Xiaozi said angrily to their backs. "Are you going to make us feel upset during the Spring Festival? Why are you leaving now that you're back? Come here right now." Mo Xiaozi had just finished speaking when a female voice rang out. "Jingshin is back? Where is it? Did he bring my daughter-in-law over?" Hearing this voice, Emo Jingshan's footsteps slowed slightly. Ji Nuan subconsciously turned her eyes to see a well-maintained middle-aged woman looking out the door eagerly. Ji Nuan had some impression of her because when she and Emo Jingshan got married, Emo Xiaoza didn't attend at all, but Emo Jingshan's mother took the time to fly all the way back to High City from the United States to attend their wedding. Although they had only met once, Ji Nuan recognized that this was Emo Jingshan's mother, Ms. Wanzhu. Wanzhu saw them at a glance, and when her eyes met Ji Nuan's, she smiled kindly and waved at Ji Nuan. "Daughter-in-law, why are you leaving? Come back. We've made a lot of good food just waiting for you." On the day of their wedding, Ms. Wanzhu took Ji Nuan's hand and called her daughter-in-law several times. At that time, Ji Nuan was very resistant and pulled her hand out. Regardless of whether she was being polite or not, she turned to the backstage of the bride's makeup shop. At the thought of this, she felt a pang of guilt in her heart. She immediately turned around decisively, took Emo Jingshan's arm hard, and led him back. After returning to the yard of the manor, Ji Nuan said with a smile, "Just now, Jingshan said he came back in a hurry and didn't buy any gifts for the spring festival. He was going to take me to buy gifts with him. We didn't say we were leaving." Emo Jingshan raised his eyebrows and glanced sideways at the little woman who actually spoke up for him. Hearing this, Wanzhu came out with a smile and took Ji Nuan's hand. "Oh, your hand is so cold. We're going back to our own home, not to a guest. Why did you buy gifts? Besides, Jingshan, if you want to buy something, go buy yourself. It's so cold. Let Ji Nuan go home to warm up." With that, she took Ji Nuan inside. The difference in attitude between the mother-in-law and the father-in-law was really too big. Emo Xiaoza still stood in front of the door with a dark expression. When Emo Jingshan saw that Ji Nuan had been obediently dragged into the door, he nodded indifferently to Elder Su, who was standing in front of the door. Elder Su smiled lightly. "It seems that Jingshan doesn't welcome us." Emo Jingshan's cold and clear eyes swept over Elder Su. He said indifferently, "Elder Su, you worry too much. After all, you're a guest. How can I not welcome you?" At this time, Su Jilan stared at Emo Jingshan's face and smiled at him. "Jingshan, I grew up with my grandfather. There are too few people in the Su family, and this year's New Year is particularly lonely, so I came here to spend the spring festival with Uncle Emo and Auntie Zhu. I didn't expect you would really come back." Emo Jingshan nodded indifferently. "Okay, then please have a seat." With that, without saying anything more, he picked up the electronic car key, locked the car on the parking lot, and walked in. At this time, Ji Nuan had been pulled into the living room by Emo Jingshan's mother. The decoration style of the Emo family in the United States was different from that of the Emo family in High City. In High City, the decoration style was simple and spacious, with green mountains and clear waters suitable for health, while the Emo family's decoration style was quite exquisite. It was obvious that Emo Jingshan's mother was in charge of everything in the family. Emo Xiaoza, a middle-aged man suffering from male chauvinism, might not even touch a vase in the family. "I heard that you were all in the hospital a few days ago. Are you all right? Is Jingshan better?" Wanzhu asked the servants to bring fruit and tea while looking at Ji Nuan with a smile, as if she were looking at her own daughter-in-law. Having been treated coldly by Emo Xiaoza for a long time, Ji Nuan was not used to the enthusiasm of Emo Jingshan's mother. She was pulled to sit on the sofa and didn't take off her coat, so she hurriedly nodded. "It's all right. Dad went to the hospital to visit him a few days ago. He was resting at that time, so he didn't see him, but Jingshan has always been in good health. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.